let's see what else we can discover today about Chiron, which is different from what we all may have read about it. Because it's a new planet, I would call it planet from now on, even though we know it's not. It's so many different things at the same time, a centaur, an asteroid, a comet, and I don't know what else there may be. Ever since it was discovered in 1977, we just agreed before we started that maybe we can say, I mean, convincingly, that it's as important as the rest of the planets in the birth chart. But as you said, Simona, because it's so new and we're still exploring how it works over time, especially its transits and progressions, and how we are affected in the Chiron return at 50 years old, for example, we don't really know. And Chiron is an enigma for all of us, for all astrologers. Even though so much already has been written about it and discussed about it, I felt like something is missing, and maybe in the years to come, we are all going to discover more about it. But I have been going my own way, experimenting with a few things, some of which, for example, Dwayne inspired me for. Others I saw in other places, and I thought, okay, this thing here may be connected to Chiron. So I was very enthusiastic to share all this with you and see whether you would agree that maybe we can find more connections and deeper meanings. But at the end of the day, I think most of it has already been felt as a general influence. So thank you for being here, and let's see. Now, I usually leave the books for the end, but this time I decided to show you the most famous ones in the beginning, because I'm not going to go through a lot of what's in these books. And the majority of the foundations on Chiron is in these books, especially Melanie Reinhardt's Chiron and the Healing Journey, which is, I guess, the most common one and the one that everybody's like reading, buying, and so on. It has a new version, a new updated version from I think 2011, if I'm not mistaken. So it was written in the end of the 80s, but then she revised it, and there is more in it now. I think there is one or two full sections more. So something really worth looking at. I have been going through her book in the last couple of weeks, and I just discovered new things as well there, which hadn't been thinking about before. So yeah, it's got this cookbook part of it, you know, in Chiron, in houses, in signs, but there is a lot more about mythology, spiritual connections, and also the big picture, like the political and social context of Chiron. So yeah, a recommendation. But I also like Barbara Hand Claw's two books. We have mentioned them before, but Chiron, Rainbow Bridge between the inner and the outer planets, is also very interesting. And that's what I'm revolving around today as well a lot. The connection between the inner and the outer planets. And because Chiron is located where it's located, it is very logical to think in that direction and to see that a lot of what it stands for is this transitional trial between integrating the personal planets, including Jupiter and Saturn, which are called social, but still within the realms of Saturn, and what goes beyond, which is the new planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So yes, I can see how Chiron is a bridge, and maybe a little bit more than what even is mentioning here. And then she's got this amazing book, Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini, which is a bit of an expanded version, I think, of the first one. And here she's talking a lot about Saturn, Chiron, and Uranus, and their cycles, their generic cycles, and the different transitional turning points of life we all go through as we age and as we go through different parts of our, like, growing up or growing older, and the crises that these planets bring that are a door opening to some sort of transformation and getting to a different level from the Saturnian level. So take a look at that as well if you want. Do you have an idea about these books from before? Have you read them? What do you think?
I think they're excellent, actually. I mean, I'm glad to hear that Melanie has done a bit more on it. Um, I know she has done a lot of research on the kind of feminine uh, part of Chiron, meaning of Chiron's companion. Uh,
Charitable, yes.
that's right. Um, and the two of the Barbara Hand Glow, yeah, I bow to them literally. She's amazing.
That's right. Well, the thing is that the books are great and I've learned a lot from them, but they have something in common. They both revolve around all the associations that astrologers could make about what Chiron may be after it was discovered. Because it was named very quickly, this was a difference from other planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. It took a longer to be agreed on what name they should be given and so on, and what exactly which side of the mythology they should be connected to. With Chiron, it kind of emerged very quickly that Chiron is the centaur from mythology that was the wounded healer, and all the connections in myth that we see around this personage give us the clues about what this planet stands for. But I'm going to skip this today. I will mention it quickly, but that's why I started with the books, because you can go to these books and you can read about this if you have never heard about Chiron before, or if you are kind of a beginner in it. And I won't be able to add a lot more to this because they're brilliant books and they're very comprehensive. I know you, Simona, know Melanie Reinhardt. Do you? You mentioned that once.
Yes, I do. I do know her, and yeah, I know her. Yeah, yeah. She's
Yes.
she's a
Well,
lovely person. Yeah.
um, it's something else which I wanted to show you. It's a bit more recent. Is this a podcast with her, with Astrology University, that I listened to the other day, and it's really very interesting.
Mhm.
So you can take a look. It's about 2 hours or something, but she's really going in depth about her story, how she came about to work with Chiron, and how she was advised, for example, by Howard supporters that it would be a good idea to write a book about Chiron back in the 80s and early 90s, and her background story about how, for example, it was very interesting for me to see and to hear that she's a Gemini, and she obviously has a lot of planets in Gemini. And when Chiron was discovered, it was in Taurus. And very shortly after she got interested in exploring it, it turned out that most of her planets will receive a Chiron transit in the years to come. So she said she had about a decade of her life when Chiron was conjuncting consecutively a number of planets in her own chart. So that was a very good standpoint for observation and for seeing firsthand if this is supposed to be significant in one way or another. How and in what way would that be? So I know this is very personal, probably, and everybody is experiencing things in a different way. And by no means we can say that this is the final word on it. But we are now almost 40 years or more after Chiron was discovered, and I think astrologers already have plenty to work with, and maybe even dare to go to another level and see what else maybe um, that it's connected to. So you know me that I have always been kind of reinforcing this humanistic view of things in astrology, the one that Dane Rudier promotes. And Melanie Reinhardt was a lot influenced by Dane Rudier as well. She's talking about this in her podcast. That back in time she even met him, and the moment she got in touch with this information, she was quite convinced from that point that this is a lot more serious than she ever expected, and that was the kind of approach she was looking for. And it was the start of her own journey with astrology. So I was very pleased to see that we have this in common, this approach towards it. So when I was preparing for today, I was trying to find connections from a humanistic perspective, which means a lot looking at the astronomy of Chiron and where it's located in the solar system, and how this maybe give us some clues about its connection with the role it's supposed to play nowadays, not just in the personal life and in the personal chart, but also in the times that we live in. So let's move on. Uh, Here I've got a few of the common, so-called common themes about Chiron. And let's just mention them quickly. This is coming a lot from the books and from, the usual sources. Just for those of you that may be new to Chiron, just to tick the boxes before we go on to other territories. But when we speak about it, it's usually the reference to the wounded healer from mythology, that centaur which was at the wrong place in the wrong time and got wounded by a poisonous arrow, and the wound couldn't be healed. Having in mind that Chiron was a demigod, so he couldn't die, that was at the forefront of his suffering and the inability to overcome that pain. So from here, and I'm not going to tell the whole story, you can research it if you want, we have always been looking for connections in the chart of something that the person may have experienced that is extremely painful and could not that easily be overcome and transcended. Usually, we're talking about something that is not possible to be completely solved, but needs to be lived with, worked with, and overcome, not in the direct way, but somehow remaining in the background. The pain should lead to something else, to understanding, wisdom, and eventually helping other people. So usually in birth charts, so we can see Chiron, if we choose to look at it through this perspective of the wounded healer, which most of the time it is, and that's kind of multi-faced, because you may have been wounded by something, and usually we all are in the area of life where Chiron is, in this house, in this sign, in one way or another. We have either been the witness of something, or we have directly experienced something that is putting a mark on us to the rest of our lives. And it's a reminder that not everything can be solved and not everything can be perfect in life. So at the same time, when I say it's multi-faced, usually Chiron comes out as one of three things or a mixture of them. So you could have been wounded, or you could have been the healer of somebody that's wounded, or maybe this is a future mission in one way or another. Possibly because of being wounded, someone becomes a healer or a teacher. As you very, very well said when we had your consultation, Simona, some time ago, and I always repeat that ever since, to strangely, people coming to me lately just for standard consultations, they all seem to have some sort of mark in the chart, or it's very obvious that these people can be in the role of the healer themselves or the teacher themselves. Maybe not yet, but after some time. And it's a bit of an undiscovered potential. So I have been telling, for example, a girl the other day, a quite young girl, that had a very prominent Chiron conjunct her North Node in the chart, in the 12th house, that maybe she can think about how some childhood traumas that she went through could be translated into speaking to other people like her, other children or people that are now adults, but she may be able to be in the position to understand in the best way. And I told her what you told me, that as a counselor, as a healer, as someone in the helping professions or the teaching professions, we can only take the client as far as we have been ourselves. So one of the things that Chiron can stand for in the chart is this particular way that we can experience something hard and something extremely painful that can serve its best purpose by being that thing that connects us to others that have been through the same thing, and only we are in the position to understand, um, realize that this is what is going on, and offer some sort of help. But the wounded healer could also be a wounder. So it could be the one that inflicts the wound to somebody else. And you can see how these things mix up. And it's not very uncommon that somebody suffering maybe some sort of abuse or something of that sort then becomes the one that does the same thing to others. And there is a lot of choice involved with Chiron. Chiron is a strange energy that's at the same time very compulsive and brings about things that we feel like are beyond our control. Usually they are. But what is not beyond our control is the way we react to them. So to me personally, this is the key, and like the sign of Chiron looks like a key to the main meaning of this planet. That here we've got something that we can potentially, and it's all potentially, work with consciously, despite it looks like it's faithful. And at the same time, even though it sounds a bit hard, and that most of what we're talking about is almost as if we are expecting something negative, or let's say hard, because I don't like the word negative, but something difficult. Yes, it's quite inevitable, I believe, when we talk about Chiron, for this to be an affliction, a trauma, maybe some sort of desperate struggle that seems unresolvable. But so far, this is what has been observed, and most of the time that's the case. But I've also seen that some people, younger people, for example, sometimes don't get it, don't see how is Chiron working in their own chart. I for example, still haven't discovered and answered the question. In my case, what's really the problem there? And there are clues, there are things that I can relate to, but also sometimes you can work backwards. You can think of what's the hardest thing that you've been through in your life so far, and then go back to the position of Chiron and see how this can maybe offer an explanation. Because I think that it's very likely that it's there that we'll find the explanation. Not that much with Saturn or with many other things that the chart can point to. But at the end of the day, let's not forget that Chiron is just one element of the chart, and it shouldn't be read outside of context. Let's try to always make the effort to look at the whole picture, the whole chart, and see what sort of role Chiron plays in the whole play. Whether it's talking to some of the other planets by aspect, in what way? Is it related to the nodes? Is it related to the sun, for example? All these things will make it particularly relevant and prominent. So it's not just the sign in the house on their own, it's how it's positioned in the picture. And I see something in common between Chiron and the nodal axis. I think both of them hold the key to resolving something, to overcoming something, to getting from where we started, which also has its so-called karmic baggage and history, to the next step, whatever that next step may mean in our particular case. But some of the things that both Melanie Reinhardt and Barbara and Claude talk about in their books is looking for the following clues. Chiron can point to family or ancestral traumas and issues in many different ways. But maybe this will be more the case if we have other significators. For example, some relationship with Saturn or the moon, or maybe we have the Chiron in one of the parental houses, something like this. I don't think Chiron itself is enough to conclude that it will be something to do with the parents and the ancestral background, but it's quite common. Another thing is because of where Chiron is between the outer and the inner planets, we can't really classify it as either personal or impersonal or social. And this bridge position between society and all the issues we face in the social background that we happen to be born in, and our personal, uh, things that we need to work with, is this feeling of being a victim in one way or another, or suffering from the circumstances around us, which is this impact of the social breakdown on the individual, especially nowadays. But not only, in whatever historical background we look at, we'll see that it wasn't easy, at least for some part of people. And this is how we are affected by what goes on around us. And if we think about uh, those times when, for example, someone is born during a wartime or anything of this sort, we can see that it's very little that we can do to change the situation. It's once again something we need to work with, adjust around, and so on. Uh, and ultimately, Chiron is giving us this urge to find a personal solution, a personal kind of way of understanding, and then healing ourselves and gaining wisdom at the end of the process. This whole thing is a long process that not everybody survives, actually, really. Usually, the feeling around Chiron is some sort of desperation about something that initially feels like it's unresolvable. And as a difference to Saturn, usually the conclusion is that it really is unresolvable, that we cannot compensate through our own efforts to really pay back for or get what we have lacked, say, in childhood, or what we have been feeling deprived of. But we simply need to reach another wisdom that is more from the point of understanding that this is never going to be compensated. And very often, the lesson with Chiron is to give up the fight, because it may well be a futile fight against circumstances that are not amendable. Many people that have prominent Chirons in their charts naturally are connected and attracted to the healing professions or the teaching professions. There are plenty of examples of that. Also, because of the dual nature of Chiron in myth, this half horse and half man, half animal and half human, in other words, is there are so many connections and symbols we can draw from there about this thin balance between the human part, the spiritual part, the mental, and the physical, earthly, instinctual nature that we all hold within ourselves. And this contrast has been pointed out again and again about Chiron, so I just don't want to repeat it too much, but it's important to just mention it. So anything that is this constant struggle between, the beast inside, the primitive creature that we all hold inside ourselves, and every now and then it comes out, and the so-called conscious, one that works through realizing what you can direct through your own will and through your own mind, is also something that can be worked with through Chiron. And maybe just to quickly say this connection with the tarot cards again. Some people try to make those associations, and I also did a talk some time ago about my own associations, astrological ones, between the tarot major kind of meanings and different planets or different things in the chart, not necessarily planets. And when it comes to Chiron, I think we can see it very well represented by the high priest, or sometimes it's called the Pope in the tarot. And it's because the meanings very much overlap. I'm not saying it's directly this, but every time I draw this card, I am immediately reminded of Chiron, because I think the deep meaning of the high priest is to find a solution to whatever we're dealing with, even if it's not really a problem, but it's just a quest, a question, some sort of search for answers, for meaning, for explanation of life, let's say, inside rather than outside. So it's the ultimate symbol of inner authority rather than outer. So instead of going to a personage of authority like this high priest and asking them to explain everything to you and give you all the answers, which also could be some sort of religion or teaching or whatever. Chiron is so much about quiet behind the scenes search or suffering or going through something in order to find your own answers and connect with your own self. So the inner guide is what this is really referring to here. And finally, a couple more things. This is a very big topic, individuation through suffering. I think we mentioned most of this, but it's pretty much the same thing as what I just said, uh, but maybe in a longer term perspective, all life long. This gradual discovery of different layers, like peeling an onion, for example, different layers of what we are about, and discovering even parts of our negative side, the so-called shadow, and how it naturally reveals itself, and all we need to maybe try to do is listen to it and look for it and not try to escape. So finally, respect for both history and progress here has to do with this between Saturn and Uranus location of Chiron. You know, in the solar system and where it was discovered, Chiron is there between the inner and the outer planets. And when we think of Saturnian tradition, boundaries, status quo, rigid structures, being more in touch with the historical perspective of how things were always done, and let's repeat them again and again, looking for stability, looking for some sort of continuity, which could be positive and negative, depends on whether we go beyond the balance of Saturn. But this is what stands on one side: tradition, history, um, paying the dues to the known way, the way that has been tried. And then on the other side, the Uranian breakthrough, the aha moments of realizing that there is something beyond and that we may not have a choice every now and then, but pay homage to that too, and that we need to let go of the Saturnian rigidity to allow for progress to happen and for the next steps forward to be made. And we can see how Uranus is just the first step. Later on, we've got the other outer planets that one by one introduces to a new world altogether, which is very, very different from what we have known up to Saturn. But there is a very big challenge. And many people know it or not, even if they have no clue about astrology. Every now and then, and today in this crisis that we're living through, this is probably the main issue of how to balance Saturn and Uranus. We recently had the second square between Saturn and Uranus, and many other things about what the rest of the planets are doing and the overall astrological picture. They all kind of point out to the importance of Chiron even more, I think. This is pretty much where I'm leading you to today with this presentation, that the other factors, I feel like they're pointing our attention to Chiron. And for example, this aspect, the Uranus-Saturn square, what is between Uranus and Saturn? That's Chiron. Maybe Chiron and understanding its position in your chart could be a way to find the middle ground and see what, I mean, how not to be too, say, a revolutionary just for the sake of being a revolutionary, wanting to change things just so that you stir the waters a little bit. There are people like that, and there are situations when we are kind of uh, trying to rebel maybe because we don't have the context of the Saturnian structure underneath. We don't know history, or we don't know um, or we simply don't want to participate in the very tough earthly reality of whatever we're dealing with. On the other hand, we may be too stubborn with Saturn. So yes, let's just think about how Chiron may be giving some clues about what's the middle ground between these two. So these are the common themes that we all already know about, I guess. Now, I would move on to something else. And here, this is where I started with my exploration. Chiron returns to the same place where it was when we were born at 8:50, and that's the same for everyone. But because it's a strange object, it's not really a planet, and it is not in the same orbital plane as the rest of the planets. It has a very elliptical orbit. We can think of it as something quite out of order. And for that reason, the other intermediary steps of the Chiron cycle, as we experience them in the course of our life, its first square to its natal place, then the opposition, the second square, we all experience that in different times of our lives. Because Chiron spends a lot of years in some signs and not that many years in other signs. So it fluctuates quite a lot. It's a bit similar to Pluto. There are many similarities with Pluto that we will find along the way, I guess. And at the same time, we can pick this 50-year turning point as a start of another exploration, which I was trying to answer to myself. Where does it stand among the other cycles that we're more familiar with? The Saturn cycle, the Uranus cycle, and also Neptune and Pluto, that in our generations are becoming more relevant because Pluto, ever since it was discovered, it was in this motion of getting, closer and closer to Neptune in its elliptical orbit. So if you were born in the last several decades, Pluto was changing its position and moving forward in the zodiac a lot quicker than it used to in the previous period. So Pluto in Scorpio, Pluto in Sagittarius, then before that in Virgo and in Libra, was spending, less time in a sign. So we were able to experience, and those that are around their 40s at the moment, for example, are even experiencing a Pluto square Pluto aspect so early in their life for that reason. So we can see, I'm trying to put Chiron in context here with the rest of the planets from Saturn to Pluto. And what I found is that, let's start with Saturn. And you may know that I'm not sure how much you're using this, but I'm using this a lot in my work. This idea of splitting life in 7-year periods. And this connects with most of the planets that we use as timers of different processes and crises that we go through. When we start with age 7, the first period, we can see we've got these 6 steps that we can go one by one. Age 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and then 41. It all begins with strictly Saturn, even though everything is in some sort of aspect, but here I have just mentioned the main ones. And at age 7, we have the first Saturn square. Then at 14 is the Saturn opposition. When we come to 21, Uranus enters the picture as well, because here is the second Saturn square together with the first Uranus square. Let's pause for a moment and explain why. Saturn has a 30-year cycle going around the zodiac, so it takes about 30 years, 28 to 30, to make one full circle from the moment of birth. And what we're following here is the so-called generic cycle of Saturn, and then Uranus and the rest of them. Generic means the same for everybody. So when you are 14 years old, whoever you are, whatever chart you're dealing with, and doesn't matter where Saturn starts the journey from in the chart, it is always going to reach its opposition around age 14, and then again around age 42. So these are all moments of change where the symbols of those planets are giving clues about what we need to adjust around. The backbone of this is the Saturn cycle. Every 7-year step And as we go along, we can see that we reach the return at 30, and then the cycle starts again. So between 28 and 30, Saturn returns back to the same place, but then over the course of life, these aspects probably would repeat 2 to 3 times. And we are picking up on the number 7 as an elemental step. It is connected to Saturn, obviously. It is connected to Uranus as well, as we can see here, because the Uranus cycle of 83, 84 years is 12 times 7 as well. So they overlap, they have this in common. And see what happens when we reach 42. This is the 6th step at 42. And here, so many things are happening at the same time. Almost everybody is joining in. When I say everybody, I mean all the planets. And I guess this is what stands behind the reputation of the mid-40s as the midlife crisis, the turning point, the moment in life when the biological clock literally turns around. And we have been physically, biologically growing up, also mentally, but physically and biologically, it's an upward spiral from the beginning to 42. And then from 42 onwards, the backward process begins, but we can argue that another one starts at another level, at a mental, spiritual level, that is just the beginning. And things become clear. There are lots of oppositions. The Saturn opposition, the Uranus opposition, the Jupiter opposition, they're not exactly at the same time, but they are all around age 40 to 42. And we have so much to go through and to realize at this moment of life. Nowadays, because of this strange movement of Pluto closer to the Sun than ever, we may even have a Pluto first square in the same time. So Neptune also, by the regularity of its own cycle, at around 42 reaches the first square, and this is pretty much the only important turning point of the cycle of Neptune aspect that we experience during our lifetime, because Neptune is quite slow and it takes more than 160 years to go around. So the square is really what we have as a feel about what Neptune wants to tell us. And with age 42, going through these 7-year steps, we are just one step before the 50s. And at the 50s is when Chiron becomes relevant. The Kairos moment, they call it the moment of revelation, of opportunity, of release, and of readjustment. So there is this period between 42 and 51, 50-51, this last stage, which I call the 7th step. So not only are we talking about 7-year periods, but this moment when Chiron enters the picture is also the 7th step of 7-year periods. And if you divide also the circle of the zodiac, the 360 degrees, by the time it takes Chiron, approximately 50 years, to go around it, you would get a number very close to number 7 as well. So what I'm trying to get at here is making a parallel between a lot of things revolving around the number 7. It's spiritual and esoteric, maybe as well, traditional symbology, and Chiron, and how this can give us a clue about how to treat Chiron and how to use it. So at age 48, 49 to 51, this is a whole period of several years when we are under the influence of the Chiron return. There is this conclusion of the first revelation that we got in the mid-40s, that now it's time to readjust and to prepare for a new kind of life to begin after the 50s. The 50s are this important decision-making moment of how is it that we want to grow old. And because of what we already mentioned about Chiron, this usual connection with a wound, with a problem, with some sort of suffering, of maybe up to that time, it's quite likely that there would have been something in life that didn't work out quite the way we wanted and expected. Then there would be regrets and feeling of failure, possibly. This would have been revealed, most of it, in the 40s, in the mid 40s, with all those oppositions. That, as you know, the opposition aspect is making things obvious, clear, and unavoidable. We can see it as if in the mirror what the truth about the matter is. And maybe the conclusion wasn't very positive. So everybody is dealing with not just the physical reality of getting older. And the menopause is very often with women around the age 50 as well. But with men as well, there is a parallel readjustment happening at the same time. All of those crises and the symptoms around those crises are urging us to reconsider lots of things and to decide what our attitude would be uh, in relation to what happened all the time up to this moment. So to me, the Chiron moment starts from the end of the midlife crisis exactness around 42 to the reaching out of the 50s. So this period between 42 and 51, I think is not always very obviously connected to Chiron, but I believe we should consider it in that way, that it may be easier to go through the Chiron return if we start working on it from the 40s, from the early 40s. But the main reason why I did this little graph for you here is just to point your attention to the number 7, because this is where we are going next. And I want to also make the parallel to another thing, the septile aspects. So the septile aspects is this 51 degrees and a bit between two things in the circle. And it's usually considered a small, insignificant aspect that not many astrologers work with. To me, this is the Chiron aspect. I mean, we can argue about this here because it's not exact. Chiron goes around the sun in 50.7 years, while this is 51 and a bit. It's close, it's not exactly the same, but I think from what we already saw in the previous thing, that Chiron is somehow related to the number 7 in the overall generic cycle of life. Here we can do the same thing and draw this heptagram, the 7-pointed star in a circle, dividing it in equal 7, equally divided by 7. And we can see that this is an irregular number, 51.4. There is something odd about it. It's not an exact number. It's not like the sextile or the trine or the square, all the rest of the aspects that we are so used to easily dividing in 3s or 2s and so on. Here we've got something different. And in a very similar way, Chiron is different from the rest of the planets, from the rest of the factors in the chart. And it also, I think, stands for something that the number 7 also stands for. This magical number that in so many traditions has been repeated again and again and worshipped and valued. You can see how many things are revolving around the 7. The 7 planets, the 7 classical subjects, the 7 musical notes, the 7 weeks, 7 weekdays. Every 7 days, we also have one of the major phases of the moon. 7 deadly sins in the Bible. The 7 metals also connected to the planets. The 7 continents. The 7 world wonders, and so on and so forth. There are plenty of examples where in culture, the number 7 has been appreciated and valued. But why? And it's not just numerology. We can see that this number is not easily dividable. It's not, we don't get to it by multiplying something to something else. It's just not possible. It's 3 plus 4 at the same time. And so much in astrology revolves around the 3 and the 4. The 4 elements, the 3 modalities, the 3 plus 3 by 4 is the 12 signs of the zodiac, and so on and so forth. So I think if we think about the septile, we may discover connections with Chiron. And also looking at your chart where you have septiles between which planets. And here we have to be quite exact, no more than 1 degree of an orb, because we're talking about between 50 and 53 degrees between two things. And if it's less than that, we have a semi-square, which is 45 and something. If we go more than that, we're already entering into the sextile territory, 60 degrees. So if you calculate the septile quite exactly, you can see which two planets or items in the chart have a relationship that is, I would claim, a chironic relationship in its nature. So far, what do you think? Would you go with me with this connection of the septile with Chiron?
I find it fascinating.
Yes, would
Um,
you explore
haven't,
it in that direction?
and I hadn't considered the idea, the connection, but yes, it makes total sense because of
Well,
this Chiron cycle.
and going
And I
forward with
also
this,
find it very just it's to have done here. It's great. So thank you.
thanks, Lauren and James. I hope this would make sense to you because this idea of being something irrational, the irrational factor of Chiron, could be seen in other places as well. And the septile producing this irregular number, just over 51, is reminiscent to the pi number in mathematics. And this idea of the circumference of the circle, and the circle, this universal symbol in astrology that we use all the time. And this has always been fascinating to me. How come, we've got this relationship between the circumference of the circle and its diameter. And when we divide one by the other, we don't get an exact number. We get this, this pi number that we all know about. And so it's 3 times and a bit. But it's not just 3 times the diameter and the bit. It's also 6 times the radius of the circle and the bit. So here is another place where I see the 7. In what way? I hope this is making sense to you. So 6 radii, I'm not sure if that's the way to say it, the radius of the circle, 6 times, and a little bit. So something more, a 7th part. The 7th part is the interesting part. And here I'm referring to what Dane Rudhyar says in his book, Astrological Aspects, about the septile. We're continuing the thread on the septile here, that the 7th is the part of pi which goes on forever. So that thing that cannot be pinned down, cannot be finished, cannot be defined. So I feel like Chiron is like this as well. It's this thing that can never be pinned down and defined. And it's giving us a clue that in life, nothing can end as a total ending. There is always an end of a cycle, which becomes inevitably the beginning of the next cycle. And this is fundamentally important for astrologers. I know that maybe if you are just a student and you're just curious about your chart and you're not like a professional, maybe this will sound a little bit too much philosophy here, but I feel like we have to start from here to understand what we're dealing with Chiron, because this leftover thing is magical, it's unexplainable, it's irrational, and maybe that's what we need to understand with Chiron, that there will be such things that we need to then work with and transform in 2 different possibilities. One is a negative, one is a positive. So it's really about this integration of what is left over from the previous cycle. And the cycle ends in the sixth step. Like we saw in the previous slides, that with the 6th step, we reach midlife. We reach one part of something that has a beginning and an end. But then it's still not a complete end at 42. We need to go forward, and some of the processes repeat themselves. And now we're dealing with things after the 42, after the opposition of both Saturn and Uranus. We're dealing with something that has been built so far in these previous 6 steps. There will be positives that we can plant as seeds for the next cycle. And there will be negatives that we need to throw away. We need to let go, like residue or rubbish, or something that's not beneficial and can even kill us if we don't get rid of it. And Chiron, I think, stands for both of these things, for the positive seeds that can be planted and should be planted, and for those things that need to be let go. Here I find a very direct connection with Pluto. We'll see later as well how Chiron is not leading just to the outer planets, but Pluto in particular, which Pluto is a bit different, isn't it? Pluto is small, it's rocky, it's at the end of the known solar system at the moment, and it's having this similar orbit, elliptical orbit like Chiron does. And when we think of Pluto, we think of bringing things down to their essence, stripping them from everything that doesn't work, it's not needed, it's not truthful, and only leaving the naked reality of what can remain to the next cycle. So here I think Chiron is like one step of maybe rehearsal before we get to Pluto. What do I mean by that? That the Plutonic process is something that not everybody goes through, not everybody understands. It's a force that we are probably too young in a way, socially speaking, to really take advantage of. But it's still showing itself. It's still kind of giving an idea what this may be, but it's usually quite extreme. So I think we have Chiron as a helper to go through something of this sort in a slightly lower level, a preparatory level, before we enter the realm of the outer planets and before we are able to really work with them. So with Chiron, a similar stripping out to the essence should be done, like we probably are advised to do around the 50s, so that later, after the 50s, we don't carry too heavy a load of frustrations, uncompleted things, things that we are regretful about in our previous journey, and we can continue the getting older period in a very fresh and recharged and clean way, because this probably holds the key to having this later part of life very sustainable and very, very well directed and not full of illness and frustration and bitterness. So Chiron is really this test. What do I want to let go? What do I want to accept? And will I willingly accept it for the sake of the future and still seeing a future? So the seventh part, this incompleted seed, is the choice. Will I grow as a grumpy old man or woman, or will I be the wise sage that has something to teach and something to give to others? And through that, enter the realm of the other planets. At least this is the way I see it. Let's take a look at this quote by Rudier, who says that there is never an end to creative activity, and that there are always ashes to take care of after the fire of life has subsided. What the 7 tells to human beings is that no account can be closed forever. And that's why I think Chiron, the Septile, the 7th step of 7 years, getting to 50, all come together. And they all lead to the same idea at the end of the day. That in our Saturnian struggle to order everything, to have enough material possessions to feel secure, to be established in whatever we're doing as a profession, for example, to have ordered family life, whatever it may be, those illusions of stability that people want to create, the trust in institutions, the trust in the social structure. And not that all of this is negative and unnecessary, but we can really take advantage of all this if we always keep in mind that that's not final, that's not going to solve everything, it's not going to be perfect, never, and that there will always be something to compromise, and that should be okay. And I think this is the lesson of Chiron as far as Saturn is concerned. As far as Uranus is concerned, it's to me more about acceptance of strangeness, something shocking, something different, something that's leading us outside of our comfort zone. So outside of Saturn, in other words. And this is for the sake of moving on with the cycle. So if we have realized with Saturn that the accounts, as Roger is saying, it cannot be closed and just finished, but we must continue, then this continuation requires the urge of Uranus, the curiosity for the future, the desire to bring things to another level and build again, with new imagination, in new territories, in something that's totally unpredictable as well, but to be willing to accept that too. And the idea that this may shatter everything that we have built with Saturn. So this balance between change and stability is probably a lot deeper than just the material plane. And then let's take a look at the position of Chiron in context in the solar system for a moment. I will minimize you so that this is visible. It makes a difference, I think, when we take a look at this way. Pluto is missing here, but it's right after Neptune, as you know. When we look at the solar system like that, we can see that there are two groups of four. The first four planets after the Sun are smaller, they are solid, and they are obviously the closest to the Sun. And then with Jupiter, something else happens. We have four gas giants, and they're totally different from Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Chiron is right in the middle between the four gas giants. So it's here what I'm trying to say is that it's not just between Saturn and Uranus, but it's also in the middle of the group of the gas giants. And when I realized that, I started making some associations just freely, saying what could I find about Chiron, its meaning, also related to Jupiter and Neptune, and not just with Saturn and Uranus. And hopefully you could see earlier that at age 42, the so-called sixth step, the completion of the cycle before the seventh, we had all of these four participating with important aspects. We had Jupiter opposition, Saturn opposition, Uranus opposition, and Neptune square, all of them at 42. Now, what else? The other thing, again, bringing us back to the 7. And by this time, you may think I have an obsession with 7, but why not? Saturn and Uranus clearly in their own cycles, their generic cycles and their cycles in aspects to one another as well, clearly divide by 7-year periods. So this is 6 plus 1. When we go to Jupiter and Neptune, we have something similar going on. I don't know if you've realized, but Jupiter and Neptune together in their mutual cycle are the only two planets of all of the ones that we know of that always go in lockstep. So Jupiter with Neptune. This is because Neptune takes about 13 years to go around one sign of the zodiac. So we have it in Pisces now. It's been there since 2011, if I'm not mistaken. It will be there for a few more years. 13 years per sign is the regularity of Neptune, roughly. By the time Neptune goes to one sign, Jupiter goes to all of them. So just over 11, almost 12, but You see, it's 12 years with Jupiter, not 13, but the moment they meet again, so they have a conjunction together, Jupiter and Neptune, in 13 years, they would have another conjunction in the next sign, and then in the next sign, and in the next sign. So there is a certain regularity about this. Every 13 years, we have a conjunction between Neptune and Jupiter in yet the next sign of the zodiac. So this is 13, which is 2 times 6 plus 1. Again, we are revolving around the same idea of having a regular number in the base, 6 or 12, and then there is this nth bit. So I think all the 4 gas giants are trying to tell us a story symbolically about this idea of imperfection, that all cycles in life and in astrology and in everything in nature that we look at will be imperfect. It won't be exact. There will be a perfect division, mathematical division, and there will be nth bit. So what's in the middle? Chiron. And when we divide the circle by 7, we get roughly the orbital period of Chiron. So this is just another way to look at it and another way to come to this conclusion. Any questions so far before I move on, or any comments?
I'm struggling with how you got the 2, excuse me, let me have a real video here. How you got the 2 times the 6. I get that Jupiter, Neptune meet in 13 years. But where did you get that 2 and the times 6 again?
It's the 13. So the number 13 is really 12 plus 1. And the 2 by 6 is 12. So I wanted to point it out this way, 2 by 6, rather than saying 12 plus 1, to demonstrate that it's the same as with the other 2 planets. It's still revolving around 6, which, as Rudyard is saying, is the natural end of a cycle, the 6th step. And then this nth bit. So here we have with Saturn and Uranus, we have it directly. The number 7 repeats itself all the time. And 7 is 6 plus 1. The 1 is the extra. The 1 is the thing that, leads us to Chiron. With the number 13, it's just 2 times.
Thank you. I needed that little extra.
Okay. I hope it's clear now and it's not too confusing.
Radilina,
yes,
can I add something? And this might be totally coming from my totally dyslexic part, as I'm totally dyslexic numerically. But so we've looked at the cycle between birth and 42.
Yes.
Yeah. So what about the cycle between 42 and 100?
It repeats itself in the same way.
Okay. So it repeats itself exactly the same. I guess is that correct?
That's right. Yes, the same aspects.
So then,
back to it.
Yes. Okay.
Here we go. And you see that because the age 42 is considered the midlife.
Yes.
And from there onwards, we have the same aspects, but backwards. Yeah, it's
backward.
So the whole process repeats itself again. It is very similar. I think you can get this when you imagine the lunar cycle. We have a new moon, like we had the other day, and this from birth to 42 is like from new moon to full moon. So the 42nd year has so much parallel to the full moon stage of anything in nature and in life. What is the full moon? It's a clarity. It's a illumination. We can see the whole moon. We can see now what this is really about, what life so far was about. So this is another place where this appears as a motive. And here we can see that from 42 onwards, we are supposed to have this natural readjustment, which we have from the second part of the lunar cycle, the second half, from full moon to the next new moon, which is a lot more mental, a lot more emotional. It's about reconciliation, about making all those comparisons and memories come back, and we are revising experience. We're not that busy acting from full moon onwards or from 42 onwards. Now it's time to consider. Now it's time to organize and to see what stays and what goes. And this is really where we're being led to in that last seventh period. The seventh period is so critical, I think, between 42 and 50. And the Chiron return hits us at 50, but it's almost like coming and producing the bill at 50 and saying, okay, so what did you decide? How did you use that period between 42 and 50? After you got your realizations at 42 and you were shocked, you were scared, you were disappointed, many things happened. You know, it was quite actional, quite really what the opposition is really about. We have Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus oppositions at the same time. So intense. And then after this intense completion and realization, we need to, I think, allow the Chiron factor to enter the picture slowly but surely. And it's, I mean, some sort of readjustment that's totally difficult, and not everybody manages to go through. But I think we kind of skip that period when we talk about those different stages of life. And usually astrologers are just thinking, oh, but from 42 to 50, we're simply going to have the next step of Saturn, you know, the next square of Saturn. And it's, yes, that's true. Because here, when we have the Chiron return, very close to that, we have another second square of Saturn happening at the same time, if we think about it. Yeah, as 7 more years have passed. And the 7-year period is really the element of Saturn, this step-by-step revelation of, you know, initially it's growing up to 42, it's growing up. From 42 onwards is growing old or growing wise in a way. So this is, I think, crucial and not very much discussed and not very much pointed out. And that's where things usually are made or break or broken, yeah, in that period. And it determines what this person is going to be able to leave behind. Whether it will be, as Dane Rudier is constantly repeating in his writings, the idea of the seed man. Obviously, not everybody could be a seed man, but I guess this is the decisive moment. And unfortunately, Rudier didn't live enough to explore Chiron because it was discovered just a few years before he died. But maybe, and this is just my guess, from this humanistic perspective, where he would have gone with it. And I just suppose that it would have been inevitable to not make that connection between the septile, the 7th step of life cycle development, and Chiron, because it's just too obvious. And the actual Chiron return is enough of an evidence, I believe, for us to take it seriously and to understand that this is really generically a decisive moment of choice. Any other questions, comments?
I have a small comment.
Yes, Nicholas.
I really like the association you have made with the number 7 and the cycle related to Chiron. And actually, if I remember correctly, in mythology, Chiron wanted to, he suggested to have education from the age of 7 years old, that education should be given to children at the age of 7. So it's something that I find quite relative as well.
Interesting. It's funny enough that in most Western countries, I've noticed, like I've lived in the UK, in Spain, children start school very early, like 4 or 5 years old, something like that. While here in Bulgaria, where I'm from, we started at 7, and it's a pretty fixed expectation that it will be 7 years old, not earlier. So yeah, I guess in the future, if the whole astrological way of thinking becomes more common, and I have no doubt it will become more practically applied. I think a lot of adjustments have already been made to things like this to comply with the natural cycle of things, a natural way of what's expected at every age and so on. Some time ago, I did a talk on Saturn, which is on the channel as well. And I go through in separate short videos, I go through each one of those ages, if any of you are interested. It's just about Saturn, but it's those steps of life and what we go through in particular in each one of those ages.
Radalina, could you please say one more time what Nicholas said about, was it Chiron at age 7? What was it that happened? Was it
that in mythology, in the story about Chiron?
What happened? Did Nicholas say at 7? I missed his word.
Yes, okay. Well, he said that in mythology, Chiron was known to have said, is that right? That it would make most sense if children start their education at the age of 7. I guess that's about the formal education, like schooling. Is that right, Nicholas?
Correct. Yes.
Correct. Okay.
So I find fascinating that you found these connections, correlation with numerology and the cycle of Chiron, how you split the chart into 7, and you find out the orbital period of Chiron. And as well as for numerology, the image you have here on the screen, if Chiron is on the 7th position from the sun.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah, and
so well spotted.
6, and on the North Pole of Saturn, there's the hexagon with 6 sides. And also the Saturn is related to Satan, which number of the beast is 666. So I find quite fascinating this approach you give to astrology and to connect it to numbers.
Thank you very much. I'm glad it makes sense to you. It's
when I was raising my children, I heard that the most important years of their life, that I should pay ultimate attention to, is until they became 7. And if I can completely focus on their nourishment and be with them until they were 7 in a way that at that point they were quote unquote cooked, then they start off on their own. And that was also like a spiritual thing that was taught.
Yes. And I guess we all need to pay a bit more attention about these steps of 7. And I particularly noticed when someone that's coming for consultation is at one of those steps. Well, the returns of Saturn and the opposition of Uranus are extremely important. We shouldn't miss them ever. But there is more to this. There are these intermediary steps as well that are very crucial sometimes. Okay, shall we move on?
It says here in the chat, no mention of the all-important
yes, Lauren, there will be a mention. So I just replied to Ron. This is coming. This is coming.
I don't know what those are, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite an important moment we're living through right now. But before we get there, just a couple more slides and then we can enter the discussion mode. So here, another picture of the solar system in another way, just to show you what's really going on there in terms of Chiron, and not just Chiron, but all the centaurs. And there are also these different comets that have been found in the whole area between Jupiter and Neptune. You see, again, we're talking about the 4 gas giants. I didn't know that when I read Melanie Reinhardt's book. She mentioned that all of them are in this area. And I thought, okay, well, this is another confirmation that this type of objects, Chiron and the rest of them, she's also exploring other 3 centaurs, Chariklo, the so-called wife of Chiron, and Phobos and Nessus, which are other bodies there that I don't know that much about, but she kind of considers Chiron as the main one, and these three being part of the symbology of the centaurs as well. And so they all rotate in this way, so not on the same plane as the planets. So you see how they kind of cross when they go around their orbits. They cross sometimes the areas where the other planets are located, but they're not of the same kind. And when we look at the chart just like this, and we say, okay, Saturn is 30 years, Uranus is 84 years, Chiron is 50 years, we may be left with the impression that they're all the same kind of principle. But with Chiron, yet another time we have something odd going on. So maybe that would be curious. I think the visual associations we make with the actual astronomy are very important when we then imagine meanings about the different things in astrology. So this is the galactic approach to astrology that Dane Rudhyar proposed in his brilliant book, Galactic Approach to Astrology. The sun is also a star, he says. And really, one among many stars is our sun, around which all of these bodies revolve around. And when we have something like Chiron, which every now and then enters the orbit of Saturn, when it's in some of its, part of its cycle, part of its revolution in space, there are moments, certain signs of the zodiac, where it's the closest to the sun, the aphelion. And this is some sort of intrusion into the sphere of Saturn. Everything from Saturn inwards, which is the material skeleton of the solar system, where the solar system used to end in the past, and we didn't know anything beyond that. So every now and then Chiron is getting in there, and Rudhyar is talking about the phenomenon of cosmic fecundation. He uses it in relation to other things, like Pluto doing the same thing every now and then with the orbit of Neptune. When Pluto was in Scorpio recently, at the end of the 80s and early 90s, it was so close to the sun that it was for several years closer to the sun than Neptune. So they switched places. And this is also what sometimes Chiron does with Saturn. Sometimes it switches places and then goes out again. Isn't that interesting? And it also, I used to think that it does the same with Uranus, but it turned out that it almost does the same with Uranus. There is a moment when it is so far away, the furthest away from the sun as it could possibly be, that it reaches the sphere of the so-called sphere of Uranus, but it doesn't actually really cross it, but it's very, very close. It's extremely close to it. And this is where we are now, in this moment, in 2021. Before a correction, when I told you the closest moment is called perihelion, we are now at the aphelion. The aphelion is the furthest away. Yeah. So we are at the furthest away right now. And in a few days, it will be exact. I will show you in one of the next slides when exactly the date and so on. But it's quite irregular. Spends a lot of time in certain signs. Now it's in Aries, and Aries is one of those signs. When Chiron is in it, it's very far away from the sun, and it's closer to Uranus. So maybe we can argue that there are moments when people are born that are more in tune with Saturn to the expense of Uranus, and the other way around, possibly. Or somehow, let's say if your Chiron was located closer to Saturn, maybe you are going to be dealing with more Saturnian issues and overcoming them on this journey of balancing than the other way around. So that's another thing to explore. And also what I find really interesting is that this Chiron cycle, because it's so irregular, it becomes very personal. So in every chart, in every life, the moments when Chiron makes the first square to itself then the opposition to itself and the second square to itself are different. So some people experience the first square of Chiron to its natal position as early as 5 years old, 5, 6, very early childhood. Others don't go through this same aspect, this same transit, until their early 20s. So we can speculate what the transit does. We really don't know. But maybe it is some sort of Chironic awakening, some sort of indication of what Chiron is really about. Maybe it is allowing for the person to experience something beyond Saturn as early as 5 years old or later in the 20s. But it could be safe to say that Chiron is providing the chance by transit to feel like and understand that life is not just physical and material, that there is another plane of existence, that maybe even if we don't understand it and don't have any explanation for it, at least we have a feel of it at that moment. So it's very personal, really, when these 3 steps before the Chiron return at 50, which is the same for everyone at 50. But before that, like in my case, I had it first square around 7 years old. And this is interesting when you have a coincidence between one of the steps of Chiron, like the first square, to be happening at the same time when something else is going on. So I had it at 7, and at 7, you see, you have the first Saturn square as well. So these 2 things need to be read together when you do that. Then the second one was about 12 years old. So very short afterwards, 7, then 5 years after, the opposition. And then I had in my early 30s, the second square. So you see how much of an irregularity we have with Chiron. Something like very early in life, I have 2 Chiron visits. Then almost 20 years pass and nothing. And then I have another one. And from age, I think I was 31, it was 2017 when I had the second square. Again, nothing is going to happen until the 50s. So with other people, it will be very different. It will be delving into the world of Chiron for the very first time, maybe not even have an idea of whatever it symbolizes until much later, until the 20s. And I've read that usually the shock is greater then, because you are introduced to something that you never imagined. You know, imagine you're living 20 years of your life in pretty much Saturn-only world, up to Saturn. And there is still not that bridge that Chiron represents between the physical reality, the material world, and mortality, and the other side, whatever that other side is. So yes, it could be that we experience depression, anxiety, all sorts of different things in the Chiron moments that we go through. But as also Dane Rudier is mentioning, there is a possibility of transcendence of mortality, metaphorically speaking. And he's talking about this in relation to the septile aspect. So obviously he didn't know about Chiron, or he knew, but it was just something very new at the time. And I think we can transfer this to Chiron as well, that this opportunity for transcendence and for meeting things not as fatal occurrences that just we are the victims of, but as something that could be given meaning of in the big picture of the journey. So now, almost at the end of what I wanted to share with you, a bit more on the same line, that there are moments during the year when Chiron is changing direction. It is going retrograde or direct. And when you check the dates, there will be 2 such dates usually. In those 2 weeks around, so say 1 week before, 1 week after the date, it is a very special Chiron moment when we all have the chance to tap into all sorts of different chironic experiences and understandings about them. And this year in 2021, this will be in July and in December. So you can check that online about the exact dates. But also on Ron's question, of course, this is extremely important to mention because we are on this special moment of Chiron cycle right now this year. And remember, Chiron is pretty slow, so it matters. It matters as much as an outer planet would matter because we don't regularly have changes of direction or changes of signs and or positions of Chiron in its orbit that are peak positions like it is now. So on the 27th of May, just about 10 days from now, 12 days from now, it will be the exact aphelion of Chiron. That means that Chiron will be as far away from the sun and as close to Uranus as it can possibly be. And looking at this graphic here, the Chiron orbit is the red one. And it will be somewhere here. I hope you see my cursor. So it will be very close to Uranus's orbit. And maybe we can argue here that there is a connection to the age of Aquarius. I guess that's a long shot, but why not? We had this year so many harbingers of the age of Aquarius that we can think of as pointers to the fact that maybe the new time is in its inception now, and that this whole large-scale transformation process is having its incarnation in real things. And we saw the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in early Aquarius this year. We saw the square of Saturn and Uranus. Many things, even Jupiter traveling through Aquarius that it just finished now. Chiron could possibly be added to the list because what Chiron is doing this year is this connection with the Uranian side of things. And even through that, we can have more of a glimpse to the Aquarius side of Saturn than the Capricorn side of Saturn, if that makes sense to you. So I have here a quote from Melanie Reinhardt, which is, I guess, more to do with the situation in the world, how Chiron could be relevant to that as well. And that, I guess, what she's alluding to here could really be the place of Chiron. So making it more important even than we suppose so far. So she says, history and anthropology teach us that a human society cannot long survive unless its members are psychologically contained within a central living myth. Such a myth provides the individual with a reason for being. It is the loss of our containing myth that is the root cause of our current individual and social distress, and nothing less than the discovery of a new central myth will solve the problem for the individual and for society. I just guess whether Chiron could be that myth, but not just in its mythological context and this direct application of what it may mean in the chart, but as a tool, as one of the many tools we have in the chart, but if we decide to consider it as a special one, as one that can join all the elements together, the early planets, the slow planets with the fast ones, the new discovered outer planets, the ones that Rudyard calls the ambassadors of the galaxy, and the ones that we knew up to Saturn. It's really a personal integration, how we work with all of this inside us and how we adapt to the new world that we have to live in. Between two worlds, really it is, because we can neither be part of the world of yesterday, the way previous generations knew it, neither can we fully participate in the new one because it hasn't happened yet, hasn't been built yet. So I guess we'll need a lot of Chiron symbology of moving forward despite confusion, despite suffering, despite lack of meaning, and kind of in the dark a little bit. So That's how I understand it. That's how I feel and came to with these associations with the other cycles and the 7 number, to the conclusion that I should pay more attention to Chiron than I had been so far. That maybe it holds a lot more and deeper meaning than I supposed. And then it's been given by most astrologers. And that we need to see it as an integrating principle that could heal something at the end of the day, can help solve something, but not in that complete solving once and for all, but in the direction of realizing that everything is supposed to move in a spiral rather than in a circle. And that's...
Before you go on, Radalina, on that last slide, I have a question.
Go on, Lauren.
Do you want to go back to your last slide? Is that
No,
too
no.
hard?
Go ahead. Unless it's
Okay,
connected to your
I
question.
don't know if I can speak to it without
Okay.
seeing what you had on your there. Chiron at its most powerful while it stations in July and December. Could you explain why you say that?
Because these are the moments this year when Chiron is going to have change of direction. You know, that's when a planet has been going direct and it turns retrograde, or the other way around. So we're going to have in July and December those 2 moments this year when Chiron is going to go from direct to retrograde, or the other way around. So turn of direction, basically. And there are specific dates, which I haven't mentioned here. So one is in July, the other one is in December. And if we count a week before, a week after, we can see those 2 like overall 4 weeks of the year when Chiron is the most powerful as an influence in the transits in the solar system. As we
Thank you. I hadn't. I was trying to figure out what you were saying. Thank you.
No problem.
Add to that. Am I right? Because actually I can't see very well. Is it December this year or 22?
December this year.
This year, both of them. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
July and December. So one in July, one in December. Okay. I don't always have the chance to speak and follow the chat at the same time, but feel free to to ask directly if you have any questions. We'll take a look at the chat a little later. So moving on.
Actually, I would like to say something.
Yes, Michaela.
Okay, I just put in the chat line because I didn't know if it would be rude or whatever, but I thought it's best to know. And I'll just read what I just said. Because presently, and I have been for a year, I've had Pluto conjunct my Chiron.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went on to study my chart in more detail, and I found out that my Chiron septiles, quintiles, noviles, semi-squares, opposites, T-squared, quincunx in my chart. It aspects just almost everything. And so it's imperative that I really pay attention while Pluto is on my Chiron right now, because actually underneath, I have not been well for a year. I don't want to go into that. But what I did was I purchased, I had one book. I've had it I'm reading 4 books right now, okay, which are necessary with the Pluto Chiron. And one book I've had for 40 years. I have 2 books by one author, okay? The one for 40 years is called A Grief Observed, and it's by C.S. Lewis, the guy who did Narnia. And he also has another book called The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. I did type it so everyone can read it. And also the astrologer Daryl Gunsberg. Are you familiar with her?
No.
Okay, she's an astrologer, and I have here 2 of her books. They just came in the mail too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Grief, a Dark Sacred Time. I like the word sacred. This book brings me to my knees. That's just a review. And also Daryl Gunsberg wrote Life After Grief.
Mm-hmm.
And that one I'm reading right now because I'm thinking, because what I found was coming up with me that I didn't realize was a lot of old unconscious bitterness, you know, things like that I was not consciously aware of, but was still within me that I've been carrying and carrying and carrying. So anyway, I thought I would just recommend that to everyone.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Yeah, that's definitely relevant. It's
Michaela, can I just ask that book from the astrologer? I haven't got very good vision. What is the name of it, please? And
okay. Her name is she's quite famous in the UK. Her name is Darylyn Gunsberg, Gunzburg.
And what's the name of the book?
She has two of them. Okay.
Yeah.
One is the word grief.
Yeah.
A dark and sacred time.
Thank you.
And the second one she did is, I think it's important, is yes, can be life after grief.
Yes, absolutely.
It's called Life After Grief.
Thank you. Thank you.
So like I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to come out of this Pluto transit alive and much better.
Well, I mean, the thing, can I just add with that? Because I mean, I've had a Pluto in my 4th house for the last 7 years. And I mean, the thing about Pluto is that you come out of this total disintegration where everything disintegrates to the point that you're made up, you know, you're pulverized literally on all level of your life. But there is the moment when you start to regenerate, and there is a new you that, you know, it's this phoenix rising from the ashes.
This is what I'm hoping to be able to pursue.
You have to hang there.
Because really with the Pluto conjunct Chiron, it does feel like the hanged man.
You have to hang in there.
It does, like, I mean, I know I have for a year felt like the hanged man.
That's it.
You know, I'm not looking for pity. I'm just looking for an explanation. And I'm thinking if anyone out there is going through a tough Pluto Chiron or Pluto in the 4th house, because I lived through the Pluto in the 4th house, and my life was not my own. I just had to follow the path, whatever it put me on, because it kept changing. And so I've been through all of it, but this one I have to get through. So I hope these books that people will write them down, and because you never know, they may need them one day.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's also in the group. I think you in the chat box that you mentioned all of these. So yeah, you guys can take a look in the chat for the titles and authors and everything. Thanks, Michaela. Well, this Pluto connection is very interesting. I would love to see your chart at some point later, because I find a lot of similarities between Pluto and Chiron. That's another thing that is just a feeling. But yeah,
I see with Pluto you can accept a little bit more easily. You know, you're going through an important, tough time, and transferring has to be done. With Chiron is more like a maverick planet. Okay. Yeah. I am shocked how my mood will change in 2 days into a completely other mood. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm like with this orbit. It's like, you know, like I cannot say I'll meet you next Saturday for coffee. You know, at 12 o'clock. I'll have to phone you at 11 o'clock and say, yes, I will meet you for coffee. Can't plan ahead. Yeah. Right.
That's similar. If I could interject, that sounds similar to the moon to me also. I'm going through a Pluto opposite Chiron, and I'm like, oh, I totally feel what you're saying about, you know, not being able to know one day from the next, but I'm also moon in Cancer, so that's kind of a whole life thing.
No, it just means that you feel it more intimately. Yes.
It's very tricky to find out what really is causing what from the chart, but if it's Pluto influence, it shouldn't be such a day-to-day thing. It should be more of a theme of a big period. Well, I think you're very right that the moon is involved here, because you know we have these sensitive points in the chart that are not just places where we have something. They are also the places where something is in a square or in an opposition to something. anything, any planet, any point. So when you make a list of all these, you can see that as the moon is traveling through the month and switching position all the time, it is constantly activating something. And if you have very tight aspects between different planets, and Chiron is involved, Pluto is involved, then it's not only touched when the actual thing is touched, if that makes sense. It's also when other things, its levers are affected by transits. So I guess if something important is going on by transit, like Pluto over Chiron, then in this whole period, the moon becomes more sensitive because it's constantly, there on it every next day. Yeah. Okay. Well, I suggest we go to the end of what I've prepared for you, and then we can just chat like this and talk to one another and see what you guys think. But almost at the end, I wanted to show you this final thing that I had the title of the talk today about the connection between the inner and the outer planets and how Chiron can facilitate that. We already talked about it, but it's not a new idea. Obviously, Barbara Henclaw wrote a whole book about it. But I just want to mention that the fact that these three, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, belong to some sort of area in the solar system that's not really part of it completely. It's like Roger says, an aura of the solar system. It requires a transition and a help to get there. Not everybody integrates equally the outer planets, but we all feel them in one way or another. I think we feel them as complexes and compulsions when we don't consciously work with them. And it seems to me that understanding our Chiron and using the Chiron consciously, effectively, kind of deciphering our own Chiron is a requirement in order to enter the world of the outer planets, even if you have them in the chart very prominent. Like I have Pluto conjunct the Sun, but it doesn't guarantee me that I would understand Pluto very well and I'll be able to use it in a very positive way. Even the contrary, having it very close to a personal planet may make me very vulnerable to the compulsions and intensity of the outer planets, forces that we don't really understand that well. And I guess they need a solid base until Saturn as well. So it's the other side of the coin. You can't have a transcendent, let's say, personality without something to transcend the personality in the first place, which is this ego structure of the Saturn. So as always, everything works together. But what Chiron can possibly help with and go to this turning the circle into a spiral, or in other words, not always revolving in a circle, repeating the same thing, Saturn style, but moving on to the next level and again going through the stages, but on another higher field, could be this overcoming of certain blockages, and they're related to the outer planets. So, for example, a possible breakthrough through Chiron for blocked and constricting thoughts, Uranus. So those thoughts that we don't allow because they're too scary, too innovative, too out of the ordinary and beyond what we're able to work with. Ideas, maybe revolutionary ones, I don't know. And then feelings, Neptune. When we come to Pluto, it's more about being able to bear the truth of the matter, the essence of things, the very naked, kind of ugly face sometimes of what really stands behind things. Going deep down into the underground, as the symbology of Pluto implies, all of these things are very difficult. They're foreign because they're out of Saturn. And we expect resistance. So I guess Chiron is the point where we can work with that resistance and find a way to let it happen. And another quote by Rudyard, which refers to the same thing, is there is in this human mind a power that seeks to bend every circular process of thought into a spiral. And there is also in the human organism something, we may call it the heart of our soul, which is capable of yearning for basic changes in feeling, for new ways of relating to other living entities, and to the universe as a whole. And again, I would think that Chiron is that thing, possibly. It just makes sense to me from all sorts of different levels, as I hope I managed to at least partially demonstrate to you. And now the real final slide is this. I couldn't miss it because based on everything that we saw so far, that's the chart of the discovery of Chiron on the 1st of November, 1977. And so many interesting things about it. Where do I start? We've only been talking about our solar system, you know, planets going around the sun, the structure, the whole like context of it, where Chiron is in it. But not many astrologers think of this and don't realize it at all, that there is something that our solar system as a whole revolves around, and that's the galactic center. And here in the chart of the discovery of Chiron, the point of the galactic center, which in the last decade or so has been the 27th degree of Sagittarius, actually more than that, it's several decades. But basically, the moment when Chiron was discovered, the galactic center degree was on the ascendant. Yeah, 2603 Sagittarius. Make of this whatever you want. Another interesting thing in this chart is that Pluto conjuncts the North Node on the top of the chart on the MC. And they have this, you know, T-square, the nodes with Pluto, with the Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. So that's an interesting configuration. But maybe you would remember when we spoke about Simona's chart several weeks ago, we were saying how important, fateful in a way, or eventful at least, it would be if we find the nodes in a chart around the angles. And here I find it fascinating that the North Node is culminating and conjuncting Pluto at that moment. Quite exact as well. Also, let's see where Chiron is. Chiron is opposite the Sun. So the Sun in Scorpio, another referral to Plutonic themes, is opposite quite closely to Chiron. So Chiron opposite the Sun. There is a very interesting article by Liz Green in this, I may have told you before, in the magazine Apollon. I don't know if you know about it. It's available for free online. You can find it if you search for it. There were only 6 issues of that magazine in the early 2000s. And in one of them, it's pretty much dedicated to Chiron, that issue. She has an extensive article talking about the relationship between Chiron and the Sun in the chart, and how Chiron is something like an anti-sun, like a force which is like wanting you to not want to live, if that makes sense, rather than the exuberant energy of the Sun. So in particular, she's exploring aspects of Chiron with the Sun in the chart. And here we see in the actual Chiron chart, the Sun is opposite. So I found this interesting and revealing. This is, I mean, if we don't count the nodes, that's the only opposition. And it's pretty significant because it's meant to reveal something as well, I believe, how this principle of the ego, of the control of the world up to Saturn, to the Sun energy, has another thing on the other side to balance it and to illuminate it, maybe. They both illuminate one another. So I feel like all the planets in the chart are servants to the Sun. They are helpers or agents in one way or another to achieving the goal, the mission of the Sun at the end of the day. And Chiron seems to be one of the crucial ones here. Also, its closest aspect of Chiron itself in the chart is with Mars. And Mars is in Leo, in the sign of the Sun. in the 8th house of Scorpio and Pluto. So I think there are several themes repeating themselves here in this chart. This is how I see it. And very finally now, the Sabian symbol of the degree where Chiron was when it was discovered. And I think this is extremely revealing. It is Taurus, 4th degree. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's from Dan Rogers' astrological mandala book, the keynote. And just listen to that. Riches that come from linking the celestial and the earthly nature. Well, that's no joke. That's really where it was on this degree when it was discovered. So I think it's extremely relevant to the idea of the rainbow bridge. That's how Barbara Henn-Claw calls it. Maybe she took it from here. Who knows? Now it occurs to me. Maybe she had this idea by looking up the symbol. But maybe it's just a coincidence, just a synchronicity. And let's read it, the description of Verdier here, and that's how we would end and start the discussion. So he says, in Genesis, the rainbow is the symbol of the covenant of God with Noah. In all mythologies, it expresses in one way or another a linking process, or the bridge used by divine beings to communicate with mortals. What the linking process brings to the individual consciousness is elusive, as the rainbow never ends where you are, yet it is the source of symbolic, universally valid wealth. All wealth, in a very real sense, comes from commerce, i.e., from the commingling of minds and from contacts, and thus is based on faith in the validity of a promise. Okay, that was it. What do you guys think?
I loved it. I loved it. It was a very, I thought it was very unique what you presented, and I'm very stimulated. My Mars is for Taurus, so I know that symbol. Oh. But anyway, I think that what you've come up with is beautiful for a new way of understanding Chiron. And the 7 that we just went through with the Elven thing and the Septile and
let's mention that, Lauren, because I didn't. So some of you know because you were with us, but some may not. In the last few weeks, we were doing this cooperation with James Burgess, the person that's behind one of the Sabian Symbols websites online. So check him out if you don't know him. So he's somebody that's developing another method of, say, working with self-discovery and so on. That is called the Elven Star Method. He presented that to the group. The recordings are on the website. And he's using, I mean, he's not directly connecting Chiron with any of that, but he's using the same idea of the importance of the number 7 in his approach that's related to the Sufi tradition that he has studied. And he's come up with this method of dividing the circle into 7s, like the septile aspect. So 7 septiles, starting from the degree of the sun in the horoscope. So you have your chart, you have the first point of the star where your sun is, and then you calculate all the septiles. So he has been demonstrating this to us as a method of seeing how these 7 points in the circle and the relevant Sabian symbols that we can find with them could be showing another dimension of, you know, exploring your chart, exploring your journey, and discovering it's a way of meditation as well, and more to it. He's talking about the 7 mysteries, that each one of those points has its own meaning that can be connected to other things astrologically too. So that's one of the things that brought to my attention the importance of 7, and then this connection with Chiron. I think Mr. Burgess doesn't agree with me about Chiron being part of it. But why not?
But I agree with you.
Okay, well, I'm glad that at least one person agrees with me. But you can. This is just a suggestion, and I think even if you don't put an equal mark on these 2 things, you can just explore everything separately. But yeah, take a look at these things if you wish. They are on the page on the channel. We had a couple of workshops in which you participated too, Lauren, as an example, and we're planning to do another one very soon. So if you are interested to explore this concept of dividing into 7 parts, different things, and including that, you can take part next time. Anything else? Let's just discuss. In what direction do you want to go now?
Actually, I have a question for you, Radalina.
Yeah.
When we talk about Chiron as centaur, it is also important that we understand also Pholus and Nessus. Like we understand all 3. Like is there an orbital connection like in the sky? Like where Chiron is, how does it would affect Pholus and Nessus, the other centaurs?
Well, I guess there is another dimension of all this. There is also Chariklo. So these 4, Chiron, Chariklo, Nessus, and Pholus, are the ones that Melanie Reinhardt is concentrating on. She's pretty much the pioneer, and I don't hear anybody else doing work on this. She's kind of assumed this task of exploring them, following the transits. In this talk that I recommended to you in the beginning, the podcast, she's speaking about this too. There was another conversation with another lady astrologer online that you can find easily. If you just type Melanie Reinhardt, it will come out, one of the top results. And she's in that one, she speaks about, for example, her in the last periods, in the last decade, let's say, when important things were happening in the world, how she noticed connections between, say, conjunctions of Pholus with Chiron, and moments when things happen, like Brexit, for example, or the election of Donald Trump, or things like that. So she connects certain events to the action of those centaurs. And I didn't want to repeat to you today all of this information that you can find to her and to her books and to her podcasts. If you're interested in Chiron, you can get to these things. And I just didn't want to, go into the mythology as well too much. But if now anybody's curious about something, let's go through it and let's speak about aspects or anything else that you may want to find out about.
Yes, thank you. Has she published a second book?
Yes, there's another book. It's called.
Oh, that's good. I'll find it then.
It's called Saturn, Chiron, and the Centaurs. I don't have this book yet, so I can't say, what's in it or some. I was planning to get it at some point, but yes.
Thank you very much, Adelina.
You're welcome.
One thing I wanted to just add to the circle and the spiral thing is you were talking about Chiron being, never ending. And I thought about the fractal level of what is a fractal. A fractal is you can never, it keeps going on both directions. And it's also based with that spiral of the pie. So I feel like there is a truth there that was stimulated in me. I'm not sure, if I'm exactly getting that right, but to me, the circle and the spiral being maybe a Chiron element in that pie, realization of the fractal nature of that comes with taking the circle and pie.
Yes.
Anybody else feel that way is possible?
Yeah, that makes me think about the immortality in the myth. That, the reason why he can never heal is because he's immortal and he just lives forever with the pain.
Yeah, I think somebody just said something in the chat that it wasn't exactly like that, because at the end of the day, there is a resolution. Chiron does die at the end of the day. He's given the chance to be mortal, and he takes the place of Prometheus. That's a very interesting part of the myth that can give us a lot of clues, because Prometheus is that story of the one that stole the fire from the gods and gave it to humans, and was punished by being chained on the mountain, his liver being eaten, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, Chiron changed, so he liberated Prometheus. And if you remember, we spoke before that Richard Darnus in this book, Prometheus the Awakener, is really, Richard Darnus is suggesting, and I agree a lot with that, that the real mythological, most relevant, say, reference to Uranus is Prometheus. That Prometheus is really the figure that describes the idea about what Uranus is all about. So this daring to, to assume the power of the intellect to discern what's reality, and to use reason and so on and so forth. So that's the fire of the gods being stolen and given to human beings. And Chiron's story is intertwined with Prometheus' story at the end of the day. And to me, this is like I was like saying, Chiron sided with Uranus at the end. Chiron allowed the Uranus to enter, or was in a way helper to Uranus. So we can see how the transition from Saturn to Uranus is being made.
And I love the idea of the practical, the earthbound, and then the realization of the celestial, and that through our own earthly struggle or suffering, there can be an elevation through the spiritual meeting with understanding what it is that the suffering is transforming to.
That's right. And in the last few days, I have been thinking the opposite way too, which maybe is not that obvious, but maybe if you have enough of Uranian insight, if you are naturally more Uranian than Saturnian, let's say, maybe you need to go back to Earth in a way. You need to be brought back to Earth to understand those basic things that are fundamental and that you cannot just ignore or be somehow feeling like you're above them. So a lot of Uranian people need to, if you think of the extreme of that energy, needs to go back to Saturn. It's not only about overcoming Saturn and going towards Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, almost as if they are the better world and Saturn is the worse world. No, it's a balance between the two that are both necessary and both part of it.
Another thing that was stimulated to me when you were giving your presentation, and I think it was Coleman Barks who made a poem about the scar of the tree. When a tree has a specific scar on it, it becomes its identification and its beauty, and it stays with it, and it becomes like what identifies it and also gives it beauty. And I don't know why that would that poem came to me at that while you were talking about Chiron, but is it Coleman Barks? Does anybody know what I'm even referring to? And he talks about the tree and what makes it unique is its scar.
Right. Yeah, what makes it unique? So it gives personality. So seems like it's almost like an agent to the sun, but at a later stage. As I guess through the suffering of Chiron, we can also understand who we are as a solar identity. I don't know. Possibly. Somebody asked. Yes, Nicholas.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Concerning the solar identity, I have a question regarding aspects to the sun of Chiron.
Mm-hmm.
As I've been trying to understand my own chart, as I have Chiron conjunct Sun, and I don't know if you would like to, I can share my chart here. Just for
if you wish to, I'm not sure if my settings would allow it, but try it.
Okay.
If not, I will let you do it.
Let's see if I can.
That's quite fascinating to have Chiron and Sun conjunct.
Yes, that's very interesting. And before I was thinking more deeply about Chiron and the positive side of what it's leading to eventually, I always associate it when I see it in the chart with some sort of affliction to the sun. And I think this was a mistake. Yeah. So Chiron conjunct the sun.
Actually, my brother was born, okay. He has Chiron in Aquarius conjunct Sun, exactly. When he was born, he had to be put into an incubator for 3 months. So he didn't have that one-on-one interpersonal with my mother. And all his life, he's been like on another orb. He's a wonderful man, very gifted artist, you know, and yeah, and his was exact. And so that's one explanation of Chiron in conjunct Sun, but I would really like to hear Nicholas' story.
Well, yes. Well, my Chiron conjunct the Sun is also opposite to Saturn. And Saturn is conjunct the Moon in Capricorn, Moon in
Are
Capricorn.
you a Gemini?
Leo.
Leo, okay.
Where is your
Yeah.
sun?
Could you put up the chart?
What about the chart sharing, Nicholas? Did you manage to?
Yes, I uploaded it in the chat.
Can you not share your screen?
I share the screen.
Yeah, so everybody
yeah.
can see it at the
Thank
same
you.
time. That would be better.
I'm so visual like that with the charts. I see things much better if I can
Yes, yes.
chart.
So let's see if I can open and then share the screen. I'm opening it. Opening it.
If it's easier, I can do it from my side. I didn't prepare the charts because I didn't know we're going to have time for them. But feel free.
I think I got it. Let's see how. How can I share my screen?
Mhm.
Do you know where? Here. I found it. I think.
So this article I was telling you about by Liz Green, she revolves around Sun with Chiron. So what it means, I have a trine, an exact trine with my Sun with Chiron. So it's interesting. Okay, great. So you're using Astro Team. That's fine.
That's great.
Everybody can see it. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah.
So yes, so Chiron is at 0 degrees Leo, conjunct the Sun at 2, and opposite to Saturn, which is at 3 degrees Aquarius, and conjunct the Moon, wide apart from the Moon. But still, yeah. So I'm wondering because as an astrologer, seeing my own chart, I've already let's say opinions about my experience in life. So I view it through my experience. But if to have an objective opinion from you, from your experience with Chiron and your studies, that would be helpful.
Okay, well, I must say first, before we start, musing about the chart, it is impossible in such a short time to make sense of the whole chart, yeah? But we'll try, we'll do some things. I have something of a flash for you, just quickly as a suggestion, and then you guys also feel free to follow me. Just from seeing it straight in 2 seconds, one thing that may be interesting for you, for all of you, the beginning of Leo is the moment when Chiron, when it reaches the beginning of Leo, where is yours, starts its journey towards Saturn. So it's from Leo to Sagittarius, this section of the zodiac, where step by step, Chiron, as it travels, it begins this trend of going towards closer and closer to Saturn. So it's almost like you were born in the exact moment when Chiron was readjusting itself to a new direction. And when it's in Libra, in the middle, around the middle of this section, that's where it's closest to Saturn. So it's like your Chiron is saying, now we are going to discover Saturn and what Saturn is about. I picked it up from there, and then I started looking what else is Saturnian in your chart. There is so much of it. Moon conjunct Saturn, North Node in Capricorn, Uranus, which is supposed to be the opposite to Saturnian ideas, is in Capricorn. So it's another stress on Capricorn. Neptune in Capricorn, a lot of Capricorn going on in this chart, basically. North Node in the 10th house, So I don't know, this is not a conclusive opinion because there are many other things going on in your chart, but it's almost like something is saying, in this conjunction of Chiron with the sun, and let's see, what is so is there an opposition of Sun and Saturn as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so even quite exact. So the sun is playing with Chiron and Saturn, and the other actor, Uranus, is in Capricorn. So there is a very big accent on Capricorn and Saturn, which almost like feels like to me that this is a lesson, a main lesson that you need to learn in this lifetime. It's like a very one-sidedly pointed energy towards Capricorn. It may be very uncomfortable for you in many different ways, but it's going to be, if you understand what Capricorn is all about for you and Saturn in a positive way, that would give you a lot of benefits, especially in regards to the North Node. That's just my first reaction.
Yes.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, for Capricorn experience, I mean, with the conjunction happening of Saturn and Pluto at 22nd degrees on my moon, on one hand, I had an injury with my bones, and I found out something, a bit of a condition of the bones that I have through the injury, and so it made me change, also give me limitations in life and understanding my boundaries. So very Saturnian things. And the same thing happened around the age of 10 when my mother passed away. So it was a restriction of the moon in Capricorn conjunct my Saturn. My brother has the same thing, moon in Capricorn conjunct Saturn, although he's born 2 years before me.
How interesting.
Quite coincidental. So yes, I think yes, that's the direction I'm taking, Capricorn. But I see it as a very cold sign, and that's what I'm afraid of lacking. Because I try to have compassion, but that's where my fear lays, where I cannot have empathy, let's say, if I become too Capricornian, let's say, in a way.
Well, I feel like this is the very common misconception we all suffer from in regards to our South Node. Let me explain what I mean. It's not just Capricorn, it's the whole axis Cancer Capricorn. Yeah, that's involved in the whole accent. And when you have South Node in a sign, whatever sign, we tend to see the positive qualities in the world in general and in other people of the South Node sign, and the more the negative qualities of the North Node sign. So the North Node sign, in your case Capricorn, could be that you see how Capricorn can go wrong, and it can go wrong in many different ways. One of its ways of not being very positive is being too sturdy, not emotional enough, not compassionate enough, as you said, this lack of show of feeling, not being able to demonstrate feeling. And what I'm trying to say is that you're prone to have the impression that you are likely to fall into the trap of this because it is your North Node. I have the North Node in Aries, and I always, before I knew what's going on, I always tended to, and see this in everybody else I speak to, tended to pick on the negative qualities of the Arian energy and saying, I wouldn't do this or that because I don't want to appear too harsh, too egoistic, to this, to that. You know, everything you can think of Aries related, that's negative. So there is some sort of a setting in us, I believe, that is feeling like we need to get away to reproach and to say, to distance ourselves from the negative side of the North Node sign. Well, this is the trick. If you realize that you don't have any danger of messing up with this, because it's your North Node, there is no danger. If it was somebody else with another North Node, yes, they may go into the negative side of Saturn and Capricorn, but not you. You are kind of shielded in a way. What you need to guard against is too much Cancer. So too much preoccupation about things like care, compassion, interdependency with other people, being like there for family and things like all family being there for you, interdependency in a not healthy way. That's what should be the thing to be balanced. Yeah, and to be cautious about. Not that much the Capricorn sign. That's what I would advise if I'm your advisor. But yeah, it's just an observation. But I feel like we are tricked to think negatively about the North Node, so that we don't realize that this is exactly what we need to embrace and to allow.
Okay. Well, and that was an explanation. So yes, okay, I have a better picture right now of the Capricornian energy and relationship to Chiron. And actually, as for as for self-expression of the sun, do you find a connection with Chiron conjuncting it?
It's
Or,
never easy. When Chiron is conjunct the sun, it's never easy to express the sun.
because yeah, I have some limitations, but also what I would like to express. I'm a filmmaker, and I study making films about healing, and that's really like I find my real identity in it. So I think that's related to Chiron next to the sun, or
Well, I think ultimately Chiron next to the sun can be a great gift, but to get there, it will be hard. It's something like a big gift that you need to pay a big price for. That's the way I look at it. And if you
I
really,
also see in your chart so much, you know, that your career, if we look at the 10th house being filled with planets there, with Capricorn, it's like you take your experience that you have in your basic energy of your sun and your Chiron and your Jupiter in Leo, all that, and it goes up and reflects up there in your 10th house and your 11th house of community and of career, if we would say it that way. And so the discipline, you're going to be able to make a film, you're going to be able to share with others and affect humanity with that which you have experienced personally, and bringing forward your creativity with discipline, with that use of Capricorn that gives you form and structure.
mm-mm.
yes,
Yeah.
Okay, yes, thank you very
Also,
much.
the dominant, you know, that beautiful, if I want to say it, that beautiful triangle up there with, you know, with Pluto and your ascendant and all that into your, isn't it Uranus is at the peak of that triangle, or is it Neptune? Which is the planet at the peak of your upper triangle?
they're conjunct, so they're both the peak.
Okay, and so to me, that's, you know, your transformative experience of your 8th house comes into who you're seen to be in the world, and with that ascendant, and they're being balanced up there in Capricorn with your Uranus and your Neptune, being able to stretch your feelings with the Neptune and this unusual awakening you're having towards your future, and that you share it with others because you have the discipline to do so.
Mm-hmm.
It is so interesting that everything almost in the chart is Saturnian.
Yeah, I wanted to add, are you in the Capricorn stellium group? It's like a big generation of us have this like really strong Saturnian energy, and it'd probably be a good group for you to be able to share with like-minded people.
Is that a group on Facebook or something?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
a
I didn't
Facebook
realize
group.
that. Okay.
Yes, because we all have it's a generational
The
thing, and I don't know, a lot of people at the time when we were becoming born had a lot of predictions for what we might do, and I don't know, changing the world and that sort of
And
thing.
now is the time, isn't it?
And when is time period? I'm sorry, I can't, on my screen,
So-
I'm not seeing a date of,
Well, so
At the end
the
of the night-
biggest. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you can say it if you want. I just,
The biggest one is like from 88 to 90. It's when they had the super conjunction of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, which that's the one that I'm a part of. But it goes, they say it goes all the way into like 95 or 98 because of the Neptune Uranus conjunction.
mhm. Yes, usually 89, 90, 91, these 3 years are when you can see in the charts all the 3 planets together in Capricorn. I was born in 87, which is a little earlier, and already one of them is not there. And then I think in 92, again, one of them is no longer there. So the 3 years, 89, 90, 91. And they say now the so-called Capricorn generation is at its full force because they're in their 30s, early 30s, and they have their Saturn
Yes.
return. They just had it because Saturn is now in
Yeah,
Aquarius, and
just had
you
it.
Nicholas have it because your Saturn is in Aquarius, and it's more going towards your generation now. So you're just a little after, yeah.
That's 91, so
91, yeah.
Mhm.
And the end of the story, because you see Saturn is right in the beginning of Aquarius at the time. But maybe we should go back to Chiron quickly because that's the main thing. And Chiron is
Yes.
quite a big factor here because there is a book by Liz Green. I'm not sure exactly. I think it was The Dynamic of the Unconscious, one of those seminar books where it's a transcript of a seminar where she's speaking about Chiron and Saturn. So she's combining Saturn and Chiron as lots of commonalities about the way they kind of make you feel in your life and the effects of them by transit and everything. She's making this parallel that while with Saturn and Chiron, we can be dealing with ancestral things and family related things in both cases, or something to do with our past in general. Then with Saturn, it is solvable. So something you were missing or lacking or weren't given or something like that, you can compensate by working for it yourself and to build it yourself later in life. With Chiron, this is not possible because it's something more dramatic, more like once and for all done and dusted. But they have lots in common, Chiron and Saturn. And here with you've got a Saturn and Chiron sun, because the sun is very Saturnian, opposite Saturn, and conjunct Chiron. The moon also, so the 2 luminaries, the most important factors, they're both intertwined with both Saturn and Chiron. You are a very interesting example, Nicholas. Thanks for sharing your chart. Very, very interesting example. And you are also this example of Chiron entering a turning point, 0 Leo, which is also very rare thing to have. And then this is the big thing about both Sun and Moon being Saturnian and Chironian. And I feel like you're being challenged to go out of some sort of family legacy situation because the South Node is not just in Cancer, but it's in the 4th house. And it couldn't be more clear than that. You're a very, very clear, directed chart. Yeah, to me.
Mhm.
It's very clear that you're balancing Capricorn with Cancer and that there is something to overcome with the Cancer side and a lot to gain from the Capricorn side. And maybe Chiron will be the agent to that.
I was going to read the Leo 1, his Chiron from my Mark Edmund Jones
Yes,
book.
go ahead.
May I do that?
Yeah.
Because there's one sentence in it that really sticks out to me. The symbol is a case of apoplexy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure what that word exactly means, but there's one sentence in it. Here is emphasis on the unbroken continuity between being and doing.
I can't hear. Can you keep your mouth?
Yes, let me start that sentence
Yeah,
again.
that's better now.
Am I loud enough now?
That's
Yes,
good.
yes.
Can you start from the beginning, please?
Of course I can. Thank you.
Thank
Leo
you.
1, a case of apoplexy.
Okay.
And-
Apoplexy, that's kind of almost like you're kind of in a state of not stagnation, of you're fixed.
And what it says here is emphasis on the unbroken continuity between being and doing, or between identity and its manifestation of itself. And it starts out, this is the symbol of overwhelming potentiality and an ever-pressing necessity for genuine self-establishment and personal stability. So I look at that as that opposition with the Saturn as well, with that, but this is the Chiron degree.
That's very interesting. Look, this is Leo, but the symbol sounds Saturnian. Isn't that strange?
It is.
Also, I know what this is because my IC is there in the same degree, and I checked what is this apoplexy thing all about, and I think this is a rush of blood in the head, if I'm not mistaken. It's like an outburst where you are out of the blue, you are totally like extremely excited, let's say, in a way.
Yes.
And I think here there is a lot of build-up pressure with your sun and with this Chiron. Something is trying to emerge. Something is trying to lead its way out of a situation which maybe in the past has been intolerable or totally like at the end of its vibrancy, and now a new thing needs to. And thanks, Lauren. This is about the self-establishment.
Yes. And that's very Saturnian, isn't it?
Yeah,
And to find your stability, personal stability, I think of as Saturnian.
Yeah.
And over that, the beingness, for me, I think of that as the Cancer or the Leo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Nicholas, you're definitely coming from a place of being more among, dependent on people around you in a way, codependent. And those connections are no longer so healthy, let's say. And maybe the time has come to be in charge, for you to be in charge in one way or another.
Yes, the self-isolation was a representation on the large scale of what was happening inside me.
Yeah.
So yes, correct. I'm changing my also my group of connections network. On one side, I had this health let's say experience. On the other side, yes, of self-accomplishment. I was able to make a movie about astrology, actually. So that was a milestone, let's say Capricornian milestone of realization. But still trying to find what I'm supposed to do on this planet.
Nicholas, could you leave us a way to see your movie? Can you put that in the chat? Is it linked on YouTube or anything?
It's on several streaming platforms. It's called The Astrology of Pandemics. So it's on, let me see if I can put the link if you would like. It's on Amazon Prime, on Tubi TV, free in the US if you're there, or Vimeo on demand, or but I can leave the links if you want in the chat.
Yes, please leave the links. We'll be happy to see.
Nicholas, how old are you, please?
I'm becoming 30 this July.
Okay, so you're sort of in the middle of your first Saturn return.
Yes, right.
Okay, so that's kind of the beginning, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Like kind of, you're at the beginning of it all.
So yes, and I'm here also because I was very fascinated by Chiron, and unconsciously, like before knowing about Chiron, I was thinking of making a movie about Chiron. So that's in the back of my mind, and this lecture helped me a lot to further understand the meaning and symbolism of Chiron related to the numbers as well. So I'm really grateful for that. And yes, maybe in the future, if I can keep your contact. Yeah, I can interview you, I don't know, for a future documentary.
I would love that.
Yes.
I would love that. I'm also a bit connected to that field. My partner is doing the same thing as you are, pretty much. So we'll be very happy to cooperate with you if you wish.
Yes, that would be great. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's just about Chiron in relation to the South Node. And that's something that a lot of people in my generation have going on where I don't know, we read about South Node and it says like too much attachment, you know, in Cancer, too much attachment to family and trying to like go out on your own and this whole thing. But most of us, and I think it's because Chiron is there, that we have kind of the opposite, like terrible family, nothing ever went well, no maternal bonds, no, you know, and deep wounds there in that Cancer sphere. I was just wondering if you guys could give me some clarity on that, because I mean, it's hard like to find in books or online resources that connection and what it really means, and you know, how to kind of transform that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying Chiron in relationship to the South Node is what you're
Like
looking
conjunction.
conjunction.
Well, that must have been a particular year or several years they overlapped in a way.
Yeah.
Which years do you mean, roughly?
For me, it's 1990. So it's 2-degree orb.
Okay, so it must be close to Cancer, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
It's in Cancer, opposite Saturn, and we all have the opposite Saturn,
yes,
opposite
yes.
Neptune, and the South Node and North Node up there next to Saturn.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I associate that with the so-called breakdown of society that reflects in the family, if that makes sense to you. And so many
Yes.
people have gone through the same thing. I don't know which part of the world you're living in, but I'm from Eastern Europe, and exactly the 90s, the beginning of the 90s was like the turning point between before and after. You know, it's when the Berlin Wall was taken down, and the communist regime was taken down in many countries in our area, and I think this reflected in the whole world. And lots of changes, not in this respect, but for other things, were happening politically and socially in the world in the early 90s. And as a result of that, I think many people struggled in their families. You know, increased immigration, a lot of material struggle, change of place, change of work. And I think that's why maybe Chiron is really felt as the wound in that period, as a Cancerian wound. But that's too general.
And you know how I started out? Today is the birthday, May 13th of my 1990 is the date of my daughter, who it's her birthday today. So she's right in there.
So she's part of that group, Lauren.
Yes, she's part of your sisterhood there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a chat recently where someone said, "Where's your Chiron? Where are your wounds?" And of course, an overwhelming amount of us were all Cancer, and it was all about family and the sadness, and so, but with the South Node there, and you know how they say South Node is what you're supposed to get out of, or you know, that thing that you were kind of coddled in or had too much of, you know, and that's whenever I see South Node in Cancer, it's always like, oh, you have to, you know, grow out of your family and try to be independent. It's like we were all born just like trying to just fight for our lives and not, you know, in any way dependent on anyone. So it's kind of hard. And so I figured Chiron has a place there, but is that some type of thing where we're supposed to just forget about the wound and move on from it, or, you know, because it's conjunct the South Node, or I don't know. It seems so confusing to me.
Node as something to dismiss. I think it's something to just realize it's your comfort zone. It's where your fallback is. It's not something to discard, but it's where you know, it's you grow from it, but you have to embrace it
and come back to it. You have to come back to it too. So
Yes.
Chiron with the South Node is very significant because Chiron is not just something that indicates that there was a Chiron problem in the past and now it's coming back and you need to deal with it. It's also that you have a responsibility to go back to the Cancer idea, and after you've explored Capricorn, to do something with that Cancer in terms of helping. Now, this is the wounded healer really needs to become a healer here. Not as much as with the others that don't have it conjunct the South Node, but have it in Cancer. So if you just have it in Cancer, but not conjunct the South Node, I would suggest that that's your own personal issue to separate from the family, as you said, become your own father, become your own Saturn, and so on. But then if the South Node is with Chiron, Chiron becomes a repeated from the past experience that you need to do something with. Because that's opposite the North Node at the same time. And everything opposite the North Node shows what you can do with the North Node as well.
If you look at the South Node as a seed,
Mhm.
you don't throw away the seed. The seed, from the seed grows the plant or the tree or the flower. So,
Mhm.
but the seed is extremely important. It's giving that initial, so that's how I would say Chiron with your South Node, to not discard it, but to look at where are my seeds for growth.
Mhm. Very good idea, Lauren. This is from Rudyard, isn't it? He says that the South Node can be either something to take away, like a waste, you know, the tail of the dragon, but it could also be a seed. Not always, though. We don't know exactly
I
what.
didn't know that he said that. It just, I
Yeah,
was
see, you're on the same page as he is.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Naturally.
Yes.
Thank you. That does give me some clarifications. You know that out there when you're looking online, everyone has this different idea and trying to piece things together. I'm like, am I supposed to just not be a healer? Is that something that's never going to happen that I should just get away from? But deep down, it's like, oh no, I think that's it. And, you know, and just trying to
maybe, as
figure it
Lauren
out.
said, you have to replant the seed, the same seed, but replant it. Yeah, if that makes sense. To be in a different context, you need to do something with this seed that you did in another way before, and it's not going to work until you change the strategy. So maybe just the strategy needs a bit more Saturnian energy there as part of it, and it will work out.
And so that puts your North Node where?
In Capricorn, 28 degrees. I'm anxious about my Pluto conjunction that's coming there next year. And right now, Pluto is directly opposite my Chiron. So I'm just trying to make sure I have everything in order. And it's very overwhelming.
Imagine if you didn't have
Don't feel
astrology.
good. Yeah, I don't see a world where that's possible. I've had astrology in my life since I was about 15, so that's definitely my parents. That's my nurturing, you know, what helps me ground myself and feel, I don't know, okay.
Right. Well, very interesting examples, both of you, everybody actually. And thank you one more time for today. And we are at the end now. It's actually a little bit over. Hope you're not too tired. Any other questions, comments, whatever, before we say goodbye?
Do you have an idea for a meeting next week would be my question.
I don't. I was hoping maybe Stephen would do what he wanted to do if he's ready, because it's one of those weeks that he can stay. Maybe I'll see what he wants to present and I will post about that for next week.
Okay, thank you.
If not, if he doesn't do it, I plan to just have a general meeting as we have at least once a month, just to talk to each other and chat in
Stephen's
general.
topic, I forget. Do you remember what Stephen was going to talk about?
He didn't say. We don't know.
Okay, the mysterious.
It's a surprise. He wanted to present, but I need to speak to him. I need to, kind of make it a bit more structured with him, because he has this, he starts and he never ends. So we need to agree exactly what it would be. But I would love him to do it because he knows so much and he can share. So yeah, maybe that. If not, it will be a general meeting because I'm still in Bulgaria and I don't want to. But in 2 weeks, I'm planning for another talk. You let me know. What are you interested in? Any topics? Any interests?
Not off the fly.
Pattern.
The nodes still.
The notes? Did you say?
Yeah, I'll be interested in the nodes for the next
We already did it.
4 years.
Yeah, we
Um,
had
Marilyn, go to
Oh,
the
so,
channel.
okay.
If you go to the channel and you go to the playlist, down in the playlist, you'll find 2 different topics on the. There was a talk and there was a
Put a link in the
discussion.
chat.
Sorry?
Can you put a link in the chat?
Yeah, I can. So I will put a link to the whole. Actually, I will share the screen with you, and you can find it in your own time because it's not just one thing.
Is the channel like the app? I think I
So-
downloaded some kind of an app.
Let me show you.
Spaces.
So this is. Do you guys see this?
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why is it disappearing? 1 second. Okay. So here, this is my channel on YouTube. That's the name.
Okay.
And here, if you go to the top, the first playlist, Astrology Archetypes, you click on that. And here you've got the list of all the meetings we've had in the last year.
Okay.
Oh,
Here they
wow.
are. You see, there are many of them. So, for
Yeah.
example, we have about the notes. It was this one. So the lunar notes in karmic astrology. That's over 3 hours talk.
Wow.
And then I've got another one for you, which is not in this playlist. I go one step back. There is another one with my talks over time. And there is this one, the times we live in. This is the current transiting nodes talk
Okay.
in Gemini and Sagittarius. That's again from earlier this year. So yeah, explore the channel. There is everything there. So if you go to my page, you would find the same thing on the first page. Let me just see. So yeah, if you go to my page, you would see the same videos here.
it's so impressive when you have been, I mean, every class, it's been, I've been here for a long time. I think I've attended most all of them. And I have loved what you've presented.
Thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
So these last few here you can find about the Elven Star, the thing that we mentioned today. So this one here, so you see a little bit further down, the Elven Star method. Here's the actual presentation, and then we had a workshop here. Yeah. Then there is this a series of talks I did on humanistic astrology, these 5. So you can watch them too. Well, basically just explore in your own time.
Wow.
There is a lot here.
Yeah.
I hope it will be helpful for you.
I had one more question. Which book would you recommend to learn more about Chiron's retrograde?
Well, retrograde in particular, both of them mention it, Melanie Reinhardt and Barbara Henclaw, but they don't go into much detail. They don't say, I mean, anything specific. You treat it as any other retrograde planet.
Mm-hmm.
But I found a website yesterday. I don't remember what it was, but I just typed, I wanted to see a reference. How can I check when it goes retrograde and when it goes direct? And there are plenty of resources online, those Reddit tables and calculators and stuff like that, where you can just find out in the ephemeris what is happening with it and when.
Okay.
But Chiron is pretty often retrograde. So it's one of those
Yes.
things that I think half of the year it's retrograde, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, pretty much. So it's not a big deal that it's retrograde as much as it's important if you were born in one of those moments, one of those few weeks when it turned direction. Yeah. So you can research that.
Okay.
And very, very rarely you have someone with stationary Chiron, and that would be extremely interesting. If you guys have any such example of a well-known person, somebody famous, or somebody just, you know, a client of yours or something like that, I would be very interested to see the chart of a stationary Chiron. Okay, anything else?
I have a question regarding, you mentioned that you have these meetings frequently, because it's all new for me. I saw your post on Facebook on the page of the Astrological Association.
Mhm.
So this is something that repeats in time then.
Yeah, we started last year around this time in April.
Okay.
Just as a study group, you know, sometimes I do a talk, sometimes not, but it's been every week pretty much all the time. I'm posting lately for a week or two, but I intend to continue either every week or every 2 weeks, something like that it will be in the future. So I hope to keep seeing you all, and somebody new is also welcome all the time. So feel free to invite others if you think they will be interested to join us. And I'm very, very glad that you have been with me for such a long time, especially Dwayne, Simona, Lauren, Michaela now for a long time as well. Who else? Robin has been coming. So yeah, it's always a
Steven.
pleasure. Stephen, yeah, but he left in a moment.
Yes, he always say, but he tries to come every week, even if he can only stay an hour.
Yes, he's been a solid regular. Oh, James, you too. I'm sorry I missed you. You are also here with us every time. So I'm very happy.
If I may mention a couple of things about Chiron.
Of course.
One, I think if you're looking for information online, a good resource to check is Zane Stein.
Mm-hmm.
He has a couple of different websites that talk about Chiron. He has one, Chiron and Friends, which talks about Chiron and the other centaurs. And I'm trying to put it into trying to get over here where I can type in the chat part. Okay. Okay. Zanestein.com
Mm-hmm.
will take you to give you the option of his different websites. Personally, I think we overemphasize the wounded healer part of aspect of Chiron, because that was a very short part of his life. That wasn't what he was about. I mean, to the ancient Greeks, he was best known as the teacher. He taught, you know, Hercules, Perseus. He taught, you know, he was a teacher more than he was the wounded healer. And so if you focus on the wounds and the healing aspect of him, you may find yourself, you know, trying too hard to find out what is Chiron about for you. You need to also look at he also has to do with abandonment issues, because if you look at his story, he was abandoned by both of his parents, his father and his mother.
Yeah. And the father is James? Tell them who is the father.
The mother was a nymph. What was her name? Phileria, something like that. You can, if you do a search for Chiron and you look at the mythology of it, you'll find out a lot about his story.
Yes, but the father is Saturn. And that's what.
Yes, his father was Saturn. So keep in mind that, when we talk about him as the Rainbow Bridge, if you look at the family lineage, what you have is Chiron is the son of Saturn and the grandson of Uranus. And so he's trying to link his father and grandfather back together again, and to heal that. If there's a healing in there, there's the aspect of healing that family rift between Saturn and Uranus.
Yes.
Or within within your own family.
That's right. That's why Melanie Reinhardt has she has a section in her book, Themes about Chiron. One of them is this, the ancestral sorting out links that were broken in the family back in time. And the other one was what you said about the teaching professions. And I think for me personally, this is the most relevant symbol of Chiron being Trine, my son, exactly. And this attraction to teaching that I've always had. it doesn't need to be a wound. You're right. It doesn't need to be a problem. It could be just the desire to help, to teach, to share, or something like that.
Can I come in here?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot. And the thing about that is that the wounded healer, it's a paradox. It's the wounding and the healing. The two is a paradox, if you want, isn't it? You know, you get wounded and you get healed, or you're wounding something and you're healing something. And so I found this quote. I don't know if this would help. It's by somebody called Paul Levi. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's very well known psychologist that has worked and works a lot with trauma. Yeah.
Mhm.
And he says about the archetype of the wounded healer, he says, the archetype of the wounded healer symbolizes a type of consciousness that can hold the seemingly mutually exclusive, contradictory opposites of being consciously aware of both our woundedness and our wholeness at one and the same time.
Mhm.
Now, that has made sense to me. So I don't know if that rings a bell with anybody, or, you know, in relation to what you said, James, it's like it's like the opposites, really. And it's the dancing between these two opposites continuously.
Did you say holiness or wholeness?
Wholeness, being whole.
Wholeness.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting how there are many different kinds of contrasts with Chiron, both in the mythology and in other dimensions? So it's not just one type of contrast, it's several different types of contrasts. For example, between earth and air, we can claim, or between tradition and progress,
Yeah.
between wound and healing, lots of different dimensions of contrast.
Mm.
Almost like Chiron is some sort of embodiment of the opposition aspect as well.
Yeah.
Could it also be in psychoanalysis the link, the bridge, as you were mentioning, the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind, like the inner planets and the outer planets, to heal the traumatic events in life that we keep in the unconscious mind?
Mhm. What would you say about the Sabian symbol of the discovery? Isn't that? I mean, I thought that would make a lot of impression.
That is
because
such a great thing. It's the
Amazing.
celestial rainbow between the earth and the
Yeah.
and the celestial being of that
Yeah.
we are.
Yes, and this description of it that Rudyard gave, before knowing about Chiron, I'm sure it wasn't deliberate. These symbols are from further back in time, defined the way they're defined. So it's just one more time amazing to me how the Sabian symbols are very much to the point, extremely.
Could I add to that?
Yes, I was waiting for that, Dwayne.
I'm aware of your Chiron in Gemini, correct?
Yeah.
Directly opposite my Uranus in Sagittarius. And just to maybe even close out here, the Sabian symbol for your Chiron, the first mockingbird of spring, creative exuberance, virtuosity. Now, I think the whole of those who are here with me would applaud you in all of these respects. You're such an inspiration, and you've put in so much hard work on our behalf for free. And I just want to acknowledge that, and once again, thank you for a stunning presentation and follow-up. Really
Thank you so much,
appreciate it.
Dwayne. You're
Welcome.
always very kind to me and encouraging, which I appreciate.
Absolutely.
And I'm on Dwayne's team there, encouraging you and telling you how much I gain. I think to myself before I take this 3 hours out of my life, I think, well, what's she going to say about Chiron? But throughout the time, I was so, like, I kept getting triggered by different ideas and growth inside myself because of what you present. So I thank you much.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Actually, Dwayne inspired a lot of this because we had this brief conversation some time ago when he just without plan showed me something about his research about the Mayan calendar. And I found something to do with the number 7 there that led to the other number 7 associations. And it all started from this conversation to me. So Dwayne, maybe one time you can present to the group your work on the Mayan calendar, explain to us what this is all about and see all the connections, because I think that's also a fascinating thing to see. And you have a pioneering work there that's so obscure.
I appreciate that opportunity. And I've been working on that for a while, so you can count on it down the road.
Pick one of the next weeks if you want, and I'll be very happy to organize it.
Thank you so much.
That would be lovely. That would be very interesting.
Yes, definitely.
And I remember hearing that one of the evolutions of mankind is to be able to hold polarities. You know, that we can be both. We can hold both things. And I think that's an important development individually that we can each embrace. Is to shout from just one side.
Yes. At the end of the day, this whole presentation and talk and everything that we are discussing, I was mainly thinking that we need to take Chiron more seriously for the times we live in and how to deal with the times we live in. I thought this is just an unappreciated enough tool for deciphering the lack of balance. We see, for example, at the moment, all sorts of extremes in many directions. Yeah, people with extreme opinions. They're really for something and really against something else. And that's, I think, the ultimate lesson of Chiron there, with all of this being in between things, being a bridge, being a rainbow where the colors mix and then there is no clear boundary between the colors. How we should be looking for balance at the end of the day, maybe.
Actually, I was thinking watching the news because Mars is out of bounds in Cancer right now.
Is it out of bounds?
I believe it. Yes, it's out of bounds.
Yeah.
So Mars in Cancer is not easy. So, but when it's out of bounds, okay, and it's also squaring.
Where Chiron?
Yes, and that's when I look what's going on in Europe right now, like, you know, many countries, the Middle East, to Israel and all this. I just see Mars out of bounds, squaring Chiron.
And that's a repetition of the aspect in the chart of the discovery of Chiron. Because the closest aspect in that chart, I can go back to it if you want to show you.
Where's the square?
The square with Mars, and Mars was in Cancer at the time, I think. If I'm not, no, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong about the sign. In Leo, no, it was in Leo. Mars was in Leo, square Chiron, but Mars was in the 8th house. So yeah, it's a bit scary. What was that, James?
I'm wondering, yeah, who else has Chiron in Libra natally? Does anybody else?
Well, that must be what, 25 years ago?
I'm the old guy in the group then. Okay. The reason I mentioned it is because Simona, I think
I've got it.
Simona, you got it? Okay, because you really hit on something for me that made me think about that, because the paradox or the polarity, and I think on the broader scale, the wounded healing aspect of Chiron may just deal with that, the oppositional aspect, and being able to find a balance between those two polarities. Between the extreme right and the extreme left. And sometimes I think when you get to the extremes, they're so extreme that they're right next to each other, like the circle. But I think that for me, because as I think about myself, it's for much of my life, I've been able to kind of balance those two. And I mean, at least understand the other position. Sometimes I will argue the opposite just to get something going. But yeah, it's a matter of being even if I don't believe in the opposite, it's just a matter of getting people to think about things. So I think there's a lot, there may be more to that than we realize. And so, you know, perhaps when you think about an opposition, or if you have an opposition in your chart, think Chiron. Think Chiron about it.
Yeah, that sounds like a
There's a-
really good place to have Chiron is in Libra because it's about the balancing.
Yeah, it can be. Libra has its downside. A couple of other things that are going on right now. One, Mercury is also out of bounds north, along with Mars. And on the, I think it's late the 23rd and on the 24th of this month, Venus is going to go out of bounds north. So all three, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, will be out of bounds north for a short period of time, a little over 24 hours, I think, because then Mars comes back in bounds. But we're also in a moon wobble period now.
That's very interesting, James, because it's very rare to have so many planets out of bounds at the same time.
Yes. And I think there is a being north as opposed to south, and all being north.
The 23rd of May, Venus goes out of bounds. And the 24th of May, Mars leaves out of bounds.
Oh, so that they would swap positions.
Yeah, they swap places.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
they're only one day together out of bounds.
Hmm.
And that's the 23rd of May.
I was going to travel on that day and I changed plans without even knowing that.
Good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good day to probably stay home and hunker down.
Yeah. Yes,
Don't
definitely.
forget, today we've got the Jupiter in Pisces.
Yeah, let's celebrate that. So
Yes.
You realize this is the first time since 1856 that Jupiter and Neptune have both been in Pisces?
And you know
For a
what?
long-
you are full of interesting facts for us. You're full of interesting facts. Well, this
Yeah.
That's what's great about having a small group is that together we're all bringing forward a little something.
Yes,
and
everybody has.
create something even greater.
Mhm. This is where I think the sum of the parts is greater than the value of the parts is greater. You know, I'm gonna say the sum of the parts is more than just the individual pieces added together. Somehow you end. It's kind of like the 1 + 1 = 3 scenario, because all of us together are greater than we would be individually added together.
Oh, for sure.
beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Age of Aquarius, isn't it?
There's something there, and I can't. It's the term escapes. But yes, this has been very good. Thank you.
Thank you. I bet you it's time that I could see where all our pictures we're all flashing. The internet is giving way, I think.
Yeah, I think it's now time, even though I don't want to end the meeting, but it's been really, really a pleasure for me. But yeah, we'll see each other next week. I hope you join us again.
Thank you.
I love this
Thank you.
digital tribe that we're making together.
Right on.
That's a nice name.
The astrological digital tribe. Maybe I should make it like that.
Thank you, Radilina.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
was
Looking
very
forward to
good.
our next one.
Very nice.
See you soon.